All set, Tom.
Thank you. Before I open the hearing for the Barnstable Conservation Commission, I would like to ask Angela to do a roll call for the quorum purpose.
Thank you, Tom. Abedili?
Present.
Hearn?
Present.
Lee?
Present.
Tangney, present. Administrator Darcy Carley?
Present.
Staff member Kim Kavanaugh?
Present.
Agent Ed Hoops?
Present.
And I haven't seen Foster. Did Louise Foster sign in yet?
She's coming in right now.
Shampoo. Okay, I'll look for him, but we do have a quorum.
You have
Thank
both
you.
of them.
Pete is
Pete
here.
is there. Somewhere.
Present.
Got you, Pete. Thank you.
And Louise is here too.
Louise is here too.
Got everybody.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have the quorum for the hearing. Acting under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and or Chapter 237 of the Code of the Town of Barnstable, the Barnstable Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, November the 26th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. for the applications of Oyster Harbor Yacht Basin Realty Corp., Courtney C. and Melissa S. Palmer, Stephen S. and Gretchen K. Bates, trustee, Ted and Dorsey Tatcom. The hearing is being recorded and broadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government's Access Channel. The plans and application are on file and may be reviewed by scheduling appointments by sending email requests to Darcy Curley at 230 South Street, Hyannis. In accordance with the Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, please let the chair know if anyone is recording this meeting. Hearing none. This evening's hearing agenda is posted on the town's website. On the agenda, next to each application is the amount owed to the Town of Barnstable for the cost of advertisement. Please send your checks to the Conservation Division at 230 South Street before the hearing. Remote participations. The Conservation Commission's public hearing will be held by remote participation as a result of an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed by the governor on March 29, 2023, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Remote public access to this hearing shall be provided in the following manner. 1, the hearing will be televised via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definitions 1072. It may also be accessed via the Town of Barnstable's Government's Access Channel. 2, the real-time public comment can be addressed to the Conservation Commission utilizing the Zoom link 847-4170-9398 or use the toll-free phone number 888-475-4499 as shown on the agenda. 3rd, the public can also email the comments to darcy.curley@town.barnstable.ma.us at least 8 hours prior to the hearing. Tonight, we don't have an RDA, but we have 4 NOIs. But before we go to the NOIs, we have a couple of business to take care of. One is under the old and new business. This is the conservation restrictions asking for and requesting for approval for the CL for the Smith Creek with the address at 564 and 0 Main Street, 68 West Barnstable. The grantor is Orlando Wildlife Land Trust, Inc., and the primary grantee is Town of Barnstable. Secondary grantee is the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust, Inc. We have Mark Robinson doing the presentation tonight. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Mark Robinson. I'm the Executive Director of the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust, which is a regional nonprofit organization providing technical assistance to local and regional land conservation groups throughout the Cape. And one of our members is the Arundel Wildlife Land Trust, which is headquartered in Barnstable and has properties all throughout the Cape and beyond. This is a property on Route 6A that stretches along the east side of what's known as Smith's Creek. And Smith's Creek is one of the major tributaries into the Great Marsh and Barnstable Harbor.
Mark, do you have a figure to show us the locations?
Well, I was previously provided. I don't have it easily punched up here, Tom.
Darcy, can you bring it up?
Yep, just going to take me a minute.
Okay.
So this is a property, 5.5 acres, that the Arundel Wildlife Land Trust intends to purchase next spring. We've applied for community preservation funds, which has been recommended by the CPC of the town of Barnstable, has not yet been heard by the town council. As part of the approvals necessary in compliance for the community preservation funds, a conservation restriction needs to be conveyed on this property by Arenda to the town. And that's what we're here tonight to ask your support for, to recommend to the town council that the town hold this conservation restriction. The reason that the compact is listed as a secondary grantee to co-hold the restriction with the town is because we've heard from the town administrators that the town prefers to have help in providing the annual monitoring reports. And so the compact would be engaged in providing those reports, both to Arenda and to the town after Arenda acquires the property. So Arenda has also secured a state grant in the amount of $200,000 to defray the $400,000 purchase price. And that state grant also requires the conveyance of this conservation restriction. So happy to answer questions. I'm sorry I didn't know you wanted a map of it, but it was provided in your packets.
Thank you, Mark. Back in October, this came in front of us asking for a support letter. I think at that time we voted for it. And I think all this package is going to the town council in
Right.
one package. And so that's why it's kind of coming back for the CL. So any question from the commissioner?
Yes, please.
Just 1 minute.
Yes.
John?
Hi, Mark. Couple questions. Number one, will there be public access as part of this grant? And the second question, who was responsible for literally maintaining the property?
Right. So the Arundel Wildlife Land Trust will own the property subject to this conservation restriction. So as the owner, they would be responsible for maintaining the property, managing it. I didn't mention that the reason why they were interested in purchasing this property is because it brackets Smith's Creek, the other side of which runs along Meadow Lane, and at the end of Meadow Lane is the Wyman Turtle Sanctuary, which is a very important diamondback terrapin nesting spot. So this is sort of an extension of that wildlife refuge that Arenda is trying to expand. Had great success with the terrapins in recent years. In terms of public access, this property doesn't lend itself to that. A couple of reasons. One is that there's a very steep drop off from Route 6A. There's nowhere to park. You can't park on the shoulder. It would be very dangerous. And we do provide public access on the Meadow Lane site, which is within about a quarter mile away. So we also want to hold land for wildlife habitat purposes. So we will be not constructing trails. The state grant and the town money that we hope for do require that the land not be closed to the public. And so if somebody was wanting to find their way out there and wander around and get a sense of the property, that would be fine, but we're not going to develop it into a public walking trail.
Thank you, Mark.
Any other questions for Mark? No? Could I have a motion to approve this conservation restrictions for Smith Creek with the address of 564 and 0 Main Street, West Barnstable?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Sampu,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Abadili,
Aye.
and Tangney, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope we can get an email or some kind of recommendation to the council. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Darcy.
We have one continuance, U.S. Coast Guard. to remove riprap to a minimum depth below mean low water to reduce the navigation hazards at Collier Ledge, a natural shoulder area of Nantucket Sound in Barnstable, and to remove and topping spindles, tower, foundations, and riprap at Southwest Rock Day Beacon to a minimum depth below mean low water to reduce the navigation hazards near the south coast of Barnstable in Nantucket Sound. This is a continuance from October 1st, October 29th, and November the 12th. And the quorum is everyone except Louise, Christine.
Yes, I am present.
Before you start, can I mention that a couple of things here?
Sure.
I think in our last meeting, I think we have three major questions that we need the answers. I just want to mention those questions. And if I miss anything, Commissioner, just let me know. I think one of the question is, can we keep the ledge and the South Rock Beacon at the same locations, but adding some additional safety devices to warning of the hazardous condition for the boating purpose? And then secondly, if we think that we need to dredge the area is 7 foot below the mean low water be adequate for all different sizes of the boat, major different sizes of the boats. And then the third, if we have to dredge, is the Coast Guard willing to relocate some of the remove the material to build another artificial reef nearby? Am I correct? Are those three major questions?
Tom,
Yes.
I think we also wanted to know why it is that the Coast Guard cannot put a day beacon or better buoy, if you will, Collier's Reef in order to make it a more safe area.
I think that was the second question, wasn't it, Tom?
That's the first question.
First question.
Okay, I heard South Rock Day Beacon, but I didn't hear Collier's Reef. Sorry.
So I mentioned it.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So Christine?
Okay, are you all set?
Yep.
All right, thank you. It's good to be back with you all tonight. Again, I'm Christine Perrin with McFarland Johnson. Dan Del Tufo, the project engineer with Appledore Marine Engineering, is also on the call. And joining us tonight are Matt Stuck, the Chief of Waterways at Aton System Planning for the First Coast Guard District, and Mark Cutter, Marine Transportation Specialist with the Coast Guard. So you already stole my thunder here. Let me share my screen. I have summarized, thankfully, adequately, based on your introduction, the questions that were raised at our last meeting. Here we go. So just to briefly recap the stated need for the project, there is a history of regular vessel strikes occurring at these locations. At least 9 incidents have occurred since 2020, with 2 occurring this year. And based on Coast Guard staff's history with this area, no other location in this area has a history of vessel strikes that Collier's Ledge does in particular. So for these reasons, these sites have been a high priority for the Coast Guard for some time. While those who are knowledgeable of the local waters, which is likely most of you in this meeting now, may not view these locations as a significant hazard, the Coast Guard needs to respond to the least common denominator of boaters. And the likelihood that a serious injury or fatality could occur as a result of a vessel strike here is high. So we have these 4 questions before us, and I'll just turn to Matt or Mark to see if they would like to jump in or if they would like me to keep going.
I'd be happy to, Christine. Thank you. Commissioners, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Matt Stook. I'm the Chief of Waterways Management for the First Coast Guard District. My team is responsible for navigation, safety, and marine regulatory decisions from New Jersey to Maine and up the Hudson River to the Canadian border. We are preoccupied and focused on navigation safety for mariners consistently and constantly. but that's just one of the jobs that we do. The other one is environmental stewardship and protection. And along with security, those are the three big buckets of things that the Coast Guard cares about the most. This is an important decision that we concluded. Over a decade of effort had gone into different marking configurations that I'll talk about here in just a minute. But know that we don't come lightly to removing even man-made riprap that sits on Collier Ledge, particularly. It's a scenario that we've concluded is necessary because there's no way to adequately mark it given the congestion of vessels in the area with limited experience in the area, given the significant draws of Centerville Beach, of Lewis Bay, of Hyannis Harbor. Folks unfamiliar with the area, unfamiliar with their charting system, going too fast. It's about protecting really all the mariners, and there's just simply too many strikes at Collier Ledge, particularly given the marking configuration we have. So just a little bit of history for everybody. Important to note that Collier Ledge and Southwest Rock as well were both built up ledges using man-made materials back a century ago, when the Coast Guard and our predecessors used essentially riprap buildup to raise the ledge to the point where you could actually get a concrete base and a day beacon on top of it. That technology is quite dated. We don't build aids to navigation structures that way anymore. If we were to start anew, we would design structures that essentially are on steel piles. They have smaller footprints, smaller environmental impact, and less exposure to wave action and elements that would damage or threaten a collapse of that modern structure. We don't build aids to navigation anymore with riprap piles, akin to what you're probably all familiar with, not just at Collier Ledge or Southwest Rock, but what you might see at the end of jetties. Spindle structures or 5x5 pipe towers are other standard structures that we use, but we wouldn't build that or even rebuild it at another location. We have been contending with, as boating has become more popular, as vessels are more ubiquitous, and as ports of call that are desirable, like those on the south coast of the Cape, are of interest to folks. It draws a lot of people that are not familiar with the area. And again, they're operating at high speeds, and it can be problematic. So we have to do something because there's just been too many strikes, and we're very, very fortunate collectively that no one has been seriously injured at that location. There's really four buckets of solution and course of action that we could consider here. One of them is, as has already been noted, could we add, additional buoys and so forth? I'm going to ask Mark Cutter, if you have it available, if you could just bring up the ECDIS chart and just zoom in on the area. I don't know if you have to relinquish control, Christine, or if Mark will just end up kind of pulling it from you. But as he's bringing that up, we already have two buoys at that location. One has been established by the aids to navigation team. The executive officer of the ATON team, Chief Greeley, is online as well. We have a second one, and that's as close to that rock pile as we can get because the vessel that establishes that buoy is quite small, 49 feet long. There's a larger buoy, red, black, red isolated danger marker with a light on it. That buoy is signals that there is a dangerous hazard here, whereas the other one is an orange and white one, for those familiar with the area, that indicates that there's a rock nearby. That danger buoy has to be set by a larger Coast Guard cutter, a buoy tender. They can only get so close to that ledge, and we want that nice high profile, and so that buoy is important to us. We also have, in the last several years, an AIS electronic aids to navigation mark on the rock itself for those vessels that might be so equipped with either a handheld device that receives AIS signals or an integrated ECDIS screen on some of the larger vessels. It's safe to say that they're based on the vessel congestion, the speeds of approach, the unfamiliarity with the area, that while the vast majority of boaters are operating safely around this rock, The ones that aren't really aren't and are at tremendous risk, and the vessel strikes have demonstrated that. It's too close to a line of approach to some very desirable areas on Cape Cod for 5 or 6 months out of the year. I know that the Harbor Master Wayne Kirker is online as well, and when I'm concluded here with the other 3 options, I'll turn it over to him to see if he has anything to add as well. So that's one option, would be add more aids. It's not possible just to add more buoys at this location in a way that frankly doesn't make it look like there's a channel there and cause mariners potentially to draw themselves even closer to hazard. Second thing could be build up the riprap again. I've already explained that riprap construction is not the direction that the Coast Guard goes in anymore, because of the cost, because of the time requirement, because of the unsuitability of the aid, and frankly, the aid is at risk on top of a rock pile more than it would be a structure. Building a structure at that location would actually require us to remove all of the riprap from the bottom of the seabed above the ledge, so that we could drive the piles down directly into the ledge. So although it's attractive to desire to want to put a fixed aid on there, ironically, putting a fixed aid on there, and unfortunately for us, it's cost prohibitive for the Coast Guard. We just do not have the budget to execute and support a 3 or 4 pile steel structure at that location. But we would end up removing the riprap anyway ahead of that, and the cost would be significantly more than just remediating the hazard down to 7 feet. The third piece of this, the third question, and with apologies for not taking them in order, commissioners, is sort of the desirability of 7 feet below mean lower low. In working with the Coast Guard units, in working with the harbor master, in understanding the vessels that are predominant in this area, including sailboats that have 4-foot keels and so on, our determination, particularly in light of the desire to keep as much of that stone foundation as possible, is that removing down to 7 below mean lower low enables a safe distance, even in a modest seaway, of the deepest draft vessel. It even might be going at speed with a squat to clear the remaining rocks. Any more than that, frankly, just gets more costly and runs counter to what we understand to be the objectives of the commission as well. And the advantage of -7 is the navigation upgrade, but also in the risk reduction, but also maintaining additional material on the bottom, which for the purposes of this discussion, from an environmental perspective, can still produce habitat and so on. The final piece, and this is really the course of action that we would be left with if we run up short of our ability to remediate this hazard to navigation down to 7 feet below mean lower low, is to leave the circumstances as is. Continue to work through good communication with the public, adjusting the locations of those existing aids to navigation. The reality is that no matter how hard we try, because we've been at this a long time now, we're going to have more mishaps at that area at a much higher degree, much higher level than even at Southwest Rock, much less other locations. And it's really all boils down to where this ledge is. Again, these aids were designed a century back, when the keel clearance for schooners and steamers was deeper than what we have now as the predominant vessels in the area. And navigation systems on board the pilot houses of those vessels are so much more sophisticated. So at the end of the day, really we're kind of left with 2 options. One is remediate to leave some material still on the bottom and get down to 7 feet to mean lower low. And then the second would be to continue working through the circumstances as we have them now. Clearly, and I can say affirmatively, the Coast Guard is not in favor of that position, we'll pursue as assertively as we can, remediating down to -7 feet, as long as we can, because it's that important for safe navigation. So here, I just want to put a quick pin, indulging your time, and thank you to my team on the Coast Guard side, Mark or Chief. Do you guys have anything? And then I want to turn over to Mr. Kirker real quick in case he has anything he wants to add. So, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mark, for the explanations.
Thank you. Mark Cutter, are you there?
Mr. Stuck, you covered it very well. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Okay. And Chief Greeley? Chief, you there?
He's been having some phone issues trying to, it was
No
Mike,
problem.
so sorry about that, commissioners.
No worries. Thank you. And then finally, Mr. Kirker, I'd like to just give you an opportunity to speak before we take some questions from the commissioners.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, loud and clear.
All right. Yeah, so I don't know if the harbor master is going to join tonight. I'm Wayne Kirker from Hyannis Marina, and I been part of a lot of the collisions out there through the years. So I wrote a letter with my own position, which is that in a very close proximity to the Collier's Ledge rock pile, there are some deep areas, and instead of digging this stuff out and transporting it a distance, my thought was, I think we can get Fish and Wildlife and the other permitting agencies to support this. We could move this as little as a few hundred yards, or even within a few hundred yards or a mile. You've got water that goes from like 12, 14 feet all the way up to 25, 26 feet deep. So my thought was, why not use this material to create a new ledge? The fishermen will be happy, and no boats are. And if you go into deep water and you put a mound down there, and you still got what you can have, well, you can have 10 or 12 feet if you want. It would be less costly, and there would be permitting, and I understand that costs money, but there's no question that'd be a lot less costly than transporting this to one of the approved sites, Yarmouth or Harwich, and it would be way less costly than taking it inland, because I wrote a letter, and I don't know how many people have seen it, but I tried to explain that moving these rocks is very expensive. You've got to dig them and place them onto a barge. You've got to prepare the barge to put sand on it or something, so when you drop the rocks on it, doesn't dent the barge. And then you need a tug to tow the barge where you want it to go, and you need a tug to tow the crane to where you want to go. You need the crane at both locations so that you can unload the barge. The barge just can't push them off or just dump them. And so, having done a lot of permitting, and we're in the dredging business too, I understand all this better than most. And I think I'd like to see the Conservation Commission and the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries try to cooperate with the Coast Guard by giving them the option of doing something like that. That would save the Coast Guard and us taxpayers a bundle of money. It would make the area safer, and there would still be the fish habitat. And it can be right close by. Just to the west, it gets deeper. To the south, it gets very deep. It gets deeper in almost all directions. And so if you get to say, I don't know what the height of the rock pile is from the bottom, but say it's 8 feet or so. That means if you want to have 10 feet, all you've got to find is 18 feet of water. And there's plenty of water very close by that would cut the costs out of this substantially, in my opinion. And if anybody has a question about this, I wrote a letter explaining it, and I can blow up a chart for anybody that needs to see it. The chart that was just shown is fine. Some of the markings on it might be confusing to some, because most people are only used to seeing the datum from mean low water. They're not used to seeing the fathom and that sort of thing. So
Thank you.
if I can,
We received your letter and we have that in the folder. Matt from Coast Guard, is that something that you would consider?
So the problem for us is going to be the permitting of a new area. The cost really isn't that much different between once it's loaded on a barge and the barge has to get transported to a new location that's within striking distance of this area. The approved sites in, say, Yarmouth Port or Harwich area aren't that far away. That part really is not that much of a delta for us. The time requirement is if we're going to deposit or have the contractor deposit new material at a new location, the environmental studies that have to occur are going to be a year plus for us. There's nothing accelerated about it. Unfortunately, that's going to exceed our construction window. We'd have to check with our CEU, our civil engineering unit in Providence, Rhode Island for the Coast Guard. They run all of our work. They're working with the contractor right now and verify that. But I'm confident that a year out is going to surpass the window of opportunity that we have to work with this contractor to get the work done. Unfortunately.
Thank you. I understand that permitting issues that you're going to a new location. So thank you, Mike. Let me go to Pete.
Okay, thank you very much. And both Mr. Stuke and Mr. Kirker. I have a PhD in oceanography, and I actually have at least a graduate class in fisheries, although I will bow to fisheries habitat understanding to a PhD fisheries scientist on our board. But my question both to Mr. Kirker and Mr. Stuke with respect, and it seems like depositing in deeper water doesn't have much of a chance anyway. But Mr. Stuke, the question I have, do you already have the permitting for the two other places that you have said you will augment habitat with the placement of rocks taken from Collie Ridge? You already have permits for that?
So those locations are pre-established with the state of Massachusetts as habitat for artificial reef programs. So we, for instance, right now already put concrete sinkers that are located at the terminus of the buoys for anchoring purposes. Once they erode to the point where they're no longer effective as sinkers for buoys, we disconnect them and discard them rather than landside in a landfill. We try to build up artificial reefs in Massachusetts, New York, and other locations in the Northeast.
Okay, really for habitat. So I just actually, so my first concern isn't to worry. I mean, it would be my professional opinion based on my education that dumping a bunch of rocks in deep water would greatly diminish the value of that habitat and likely even result in sedimentation around those rocks, giving it a limited lifespan. So I'm happy to hear, Mr. Stuke, that the option of dumping rocks into deeper water is a option that will not be considered either by the Coast Guard and hopefully not by this commission. So I'm good. Well, actually, no, I am going to take a couple other observations. So perhaps other commissioners have been out there, but I've been out there fishing. And I would agree, a congestion of vessels is there. And the reason for that is it is a locally famous fishing spot. That's what attracts all of these boats. That's why it's congested. And yes, it is quite shallow. I suspect, given the history, that there's not been any serious injuries there, that the groundings on these rocks have been probably under very slow speeds as people try to fish this ledge. It is a destination for our local fishing community. It is supreme habitat for a whole variety of species. So as a scientist, I have great concern about losing this kind of habitat, this value to a fishery in a bay or in the sound that really lacks this kind of structure, this kind of diversity for a number of different species. So I'm good for that right now. I'll probably come back later, but I'm very glad we are not going to consider deep water disposal of these rocks. Thank you for now.
Thank you, Pete. Bill?
Yeah, I'm really, I'm really sorry that Matt Stuke wasn't here earlier to hear our lengthy discussion about the value of the habitat. It's really an unusual area. If you go online and you Google Collier's Ledge, black bass fishing, Cape Cod, it's like right up there. It's a very important place. In the last meeting that we had, I ended up presenting some information about siltation. And as you take a ledge down, a reef down, you end up promoting siltation. And the species, you know, the juveniles hang out in the rocks in like a meter depth. And that wave-washed rock is phenomenally valuable and unusual. I mean, I wish you, I mean, we have so much information in the files regarding black bass, tautog, and whatnot. I mean, this is really a significant place. On another note, at the last meeting, I was really struck by something John Abadili said. You know, we're like going around, well, what is this contradictory message we're getting from the Marine Fisheries Division? They say, well, leave it in place and not. And John goes, Bill, it's a navigation hazard. And it's like, I thought, oh, yeah, it is a navigation hazard. And so therefore you conclude, well, that they're going along with it. But I'd like to just revisit the comment letter from the Marine Fisheries. They, in their first bullet in their letter of recommendations, they said they recommend that the Collier Ledge and Southwest Rock Day Beacon remain in place. That's like bullet 1. And then they have a second bullet, and it said, if removing these structures is deemed necessary to maintain safe navigation, Marine Fisheries recommends removing only the uppermost portions of riprap from each structure, and blah, blah, so forth. Then in its third bullet, it says that the Marine Fisheries suggests additional mitigation if it's necessary to dredge. But in that third bullet, it also says, in the third bullet, it goes, while Mass Division of Marine Fisheries preference is for the material to be left in place to maintain in-kind habitat integrity, if removal is deemed necessary, some ecological benefit could be retained by contributing the material to nearby artificial reefs. I thought about that and I thought, you know, the consultants and some of us are missing a point. I believe that the Marine Fisheries is implicitly saying if removing these structures is deemed necessary to maintain navigation, and what's not said is because it cannot be rendered a safe area using means other than dredging, then dredge per these recommendations. I mean, surely in preparing their comment letter, the Marine Fisheries reviewed the NOI materials that they were commenting on. They're not dummies. They were aware that this is an area that already has existing aids to navigation, that it's already inherently unsafe for navigation, and that the proposal is to reduce the problem of boats periodically running aground on the reef. Marine Fisheries didn't spell it out sufficiently, but surely their preference is not to dredge and to find alternative ways to make it's safer for navigation. And they, you know, they literally, they in their letter, they said, you know, the locations provide important habitat for recreational and commercially important species. And that Nantucket Sound has limited habitat of this kind, and that removing these structures, quote, this is the Marine Fisheries, it could adversely affect local biodiversity, unquote. You know, I mean, this is an important thing. And I really think that, I don't know, I find it really hard to believe that with all the money for dredging that somehow we can't find a solution that retains this very important habitat. I mean, it just baffles me that we can't put in a third set of buoys or bring the buoys in closer. And I get the day beacon, maybe you can't establish a pile system, but it's such an important and historically important and cultural spot in our town. And it would be, if you moved it off into a deeper water, it would not be nearly the value that it is now. And if you completely took it all away, Barnstable would lose that. To me, this is a tragic case. And I don't know. I'm not happy about it. Thank you.
And we don't do this lightly. I appreciate your comments and I take them to heart. Again, we've been at this a long time, and we have reached a point where the vessels, by the way, to the previous question, they're not actually gently landing on the rocks. They are bounding themselves high and dry at speed in the most severe cases. And our concern is that it's only a matter of time before someone ejects out of a vessel, injures themselves because of their unfamiliarity with the area, because they may be transient, they may not read the chart properly, but the folks who navigate are out there like that. And I think for the Coast Guard, it's not so much a dismissal of the environmental concerns in any way, shape, or form. It's a higher premium that's being placed on reducing the navigation risk, which in our estimation, as the agency that deals with navigation safety, is presenting a clear and present danger to the public. It's only a matter of time before someone gets really hurt, akin to a couple years back when a boat ran aground on Sedgwick Harbor's breakwater, and there was a tragedy there that happens in Buzzards Bay periodically. And it's made worse by the fact that the ledge itself was built up with a man-made set of riprap that was designed to mark the ledge for deeper draft vessels. The purpose of it has since transformed for sure, and we understand that. And we're really appreciative of the need for it. The reality is our need for us right now is to make sure that we do everything we can, everything in our power to remediate the navigation hazard for public safety purposes.
Thank you, Matt. John?
Yeah, Pete, first the comment you made that I would disagree with. Although it is congested, and I fish there, I boat there, I run from Katuitt many times into Hyannis, right by there. It is a very active area, not just for fishermen, but for boaters going in and out of Hyannis Harbor, coming from Osterville, coming from offshore, wherever. So, Pete, the congestion there, as pointed out by Mark, is far more than just fishermen. And believe me, I boat there so much and made that run so much, I'm quite familiar with it. Secondly, I think there is ample evidence, Bill, and you submitted it and did a great job doing the research, that this is clearly an important habitat. There's no question about that. On the other hand, there is no question when the harbor master, the Coast Guard, experts like Mr. Kirker all testified that this is a significant navigation hazard. It is. I mean, that's unequivocal. So I'll go right back to saying, how do we balance these two conflicting pieces of very strong evidence? The value of the habitat and the life-threatening problem of the navigation. How do we balance those two? Mark, a question that I have for you. I think in Peter's question, he asked about, you've already got some permitting going underway in Yarmouth or whatever. Could any of these rocks be used in those areas? That's my question.
Thanks for that. I'm going to turn this over to Christine, who's the contract lead permitter for lining up the material. The short answer for me from a Coast Guard perspective is yes, we can, because we take our own concrete sinkers and lay them out on those artificial reefs. I can't imagine that granite riprap that's been in a marine environment for that long would be any less desirable than our sinkers would be. But she's had more conversations, Christine, if you could, any of the discussions with folks that have weighed in on that end, if you could just speak to that briefly, it'd be helpful.
Sure. The Division of Marine Fisheries has confirmed that the material that would be removed is suitable and meets all the guidelines required for material placed at Yarmouth or Harwich. They've also confirmed that no additional permitting on the part of the Coast Guard would be required to dispose of that material in those locations, that there are active open permits currently in place for those two sites.
Thank you. It's fairly clear to me, and I would remind all the commissioners, based on the attorney that sent us information on this thing, it's a voluntary finding. Bill, you and I read that Division of Marine Fisheries letter in two different ways. In all respect, I'm sorry. It is my view that it's the best win-win for everybody. The way to balance the two heavily evidenced conflicting requirements, the habitat versus the navigation hazard versus potential life-threatening navigation. The best option, in my opinion, especially since this is a voluntary, would be to allow them to remove down to the 7-foot level, below mean low, with a condition that the removed rocks be placed somewhere in Nantucket Sound, either to add to or create a new fish habitat. I think there would be certainly a short-term loss to fish habitat, but over the long term, we would be creating new habitat or adding to existing habitat, and at the same time, potentially saving lives and clearly a navigational hazard problem. And I think we really ought to consider that as a good balance.
Thank you, John. Angela?
Yeah, I just got to say, and I appreciate it. My heart is with you, Bill, but I see it the way John does, that I feel like the Conservation Commission should support the conditions outlined by Marine Fisheries, that if this was deemed a navigational hazard and they're willing to put conditions on what to do, but they're willing to go with it, that we should as well. So that's where I'm leaning to go as well. I read that letter from the fisheries a little different than you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. I read the same thing I reviewed the material this afternoon and then listened to Matt's explanation and stuff like that. It's kind of like, put me more comfortable in terms of, agreeing with the permit, asking for the dredge material to go down to 7 feet below the mean low water. So mean low water. So I think that's my opinion right now. Bill?
Yeah, to address John Abadili's comment, I mean, how do you find the balance? It's either it's a navigation problem or it's a habitat problem, one or the other. And we've got to me, I believe it's a non-dredge alternative. I mean, it's a non-dredge alternative. And I believe that is what the Marine Fisheries letter is saying. I mean, that's how I read it. And
Mr. Hearn, what do you mean by non-dredge alternative? Just so I can understand what you're referring to.
In other words, either an additional buoy, closer buoys. I'm certainly not able to tell you how to engineer a day beacon with pilings that would work. But I mean, something. Even dumping more rock to make it go, above the water line potentially. I mean, it just seems like there should be something that, if you're going to be dredging it, you have a lot of money to do that.
To contextualize it, this is the most robust marking system for a hazard of its kind in our district. I can't think of one that's more robustly marked with 2 physical aids already, plus an electronic aid. We'd be hard pressed to sort of identify a similar scenario. The unfortunate part is that this is in the middle of a very sandy, relatively deep area, and it's the only hazard in the area, which of course is also why it's the only fish habitat. And it's en route to so many desirable locations from transient boaters, and that's much of our problem is rooted in that issue, sadly. The upside is right now, folks can't get to the center of that rock pile's footprint and foundation because there are rocks there. if the whole thing is taken down to -7 below mean low, now you've got 3 to 4 feet of rock and riprap over a much wider swath, potentially allowing more folks to be out there enjoying the opportunity. I know it's not significant consolation, and I understand that. I have been at search and rescue cases. I have seen what happens when things go sideways on fast-moving recreational craft, especially. And they strike something at speed, and things go wrong for those folks, and there's no take-backs on that. This is not, we do not like even taking our own riprap that we put centuries old, a century back, 50 years back, and removing it for without good cause. We only do it when the need is so great that it drives our investment thinking and our priorities, and that's our challenge right now, unfortunately.
So, by the way, Mark, excuse me, but that AIS system you mentioned, I'm not aware of any boaters in my size, 28, 34, 35, that have AIS.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's not an answer.
So I have a follow-up, and the other point is when you were talking about the permitting problem of permitting putting the rocks and creating a new reef, if you will, nearby, as Wayne Kirker was talking about. He said, well, that might take like 2 or 3 years or something. There has been indeed, 1 or 2 accidents a year, and to date there hasn't been a fatality. I mean, if we were to try to pursue that permitting and do it in a couple of years, we would be able to have that habitat, near us in Barnstable at a depth, unfortunately not in the wave washed zone, but at least it would be good. I mean, is delaying this dredging not? Is it so unreasonable to put off for a couple of years? The thing has been there since what, 1880 or something?
Yeah, so the construction cycle for us is very lengthy. We began this journey 5 or 6 years ago to get where we are today, already identifying that it had been a growing and significant problem even back then. Everything else has queued up in the meantime. Unfortunately, this is just how our contracting process goes. Things are pipelined and tracked as they are when they go through the pipe. It's very difficult to change something a year and a half from now or 2 years from now. We'd be likely to look at, because we're not going to start the contracting until we know that we can do it. And so that's going to put it off even 4, 5, 6 more years. That's just not a position that the Coast Guard can take for the purposes of public safety, unfortunately.
Thank you, Matt. Before I go to peak, since we're talking about these navigations issues, and I see Brian Taylor is here. Brian, do you want to make your comment?
Good evening, Brian Taylor, Harbor Master for the town of Barnstable. I will strongly agree with the Coast Guard on this avenue, and my position is tough. I need to weigh recreational boating with commercial boating, but I can tell you that this location is unequivocally one of the most areas where we have boating accidents every single year. So I would completely support the Coast Guard in this venue.
Thank you, Brian. Pete?
Okay, well, Matt, I actually was glad to hear that along with safety, that the Coast Guard has as its responsibility some environmental stewardship. And when I look at the history, and again, I don't have a video here because I've got awful connection with the internet, but just allow me to continue speaking. That when this came up the first time and the second time and now the third time, I'm sort of struck that we here at Conservation, and Commissioner Abadili, I know you said that it's a voluntary with it. It's seemingly pretty much out of our expertise to be able to really evaluate the pros and cons of this. I know Dr. Hearn didn't mention that he has a PhD in fisheries, so I'll mention that for him. It was earlier mentioned in our last meeting, but so that everyone who's newly present here knows that. So he knows what he's speaking about. But here's a question I've got. I do understand the benefits of us not denying this, that we can put on some conditions. I'm not sure if those conditions can hold and jurisdiction over the Coast Guard, but perhaps a condition that would make me feel better is the condition that Coast Guard it mandates an interagency meeting between DEP, Department of Marine Fisheries, and Coast Guard, so that this analysis of safety, yes, safety, but then habitat improvement can be discussed. And again, perhaps outside of our town, but at least at the state level with the Division of Marine Fisheries. I would have really liked to have had Division of Marine Fisheries speaking to us directly on top of the letter they sent to us, which I think we can see has different interpretations by different commissioners. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pete. Any other question from the commissioner? Let me go. Oh, John. John?
You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Bill. Just a comment, I mean, you listen to the United States Coast Guard and all of their navigation experience and all their experience in large cities, they're also on the environmental issues. And then you listen to our own harbor master. I mean, how many times we say we've got to give great deference to the biologists when it comes to shellfish studies. Well, here you get the harbor master saying, I can't ever more strongly than support this. I mean, it just seems to me it would be a great balance for both fish habitat, sea habitat, and navigation to impose a condition. And Pete, I would not in any way disagree with a recommendation relative to that meeting. But I would impose a condition because they already have the permit that they should be required to use these to add to an existing or create a new habitat in Nantucket Sound. That's where I would come from. And I think that is the right, I can't tell you strong enough, Bill, I think that is the right balance between two very, very conflicting problems. And I respect your background in fish science. I absolutely respect that. But I have navigated this area. I know what it's like. I listen to the harbor master. I listen to the Coast Guard. I listen to a guy like Mr. Kirker and say, come on, that is irrefutable evidence of a navigation hazard.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Let me go to the public comment. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Yeah, we've got a number of members of the fishing community here. If you'd like to raise your virtual hand,
Jacob.
You got a comment or a question? Jacob Angelo first.
Oh yeah, I apologize. I'm coming a little late to this, but it is a hazard the way it's marked now, but is there any thought into marking this properly? Right now the markers are 100 yards off of the actual rock pile. Would these incidents be what they are if it was marked on top of the rock pile or very, very, very close to the rock pile?
Mark must have missed that first testimony that Mark gave or whatever.
Matt mentioned it.
Yeah, the long and the short is that one buoy, as you know, based on being an experienced navigator in that area, is large. It's as close as it can get based on the buoy tender and their proximity and their navigation capability to get as close up as they can. And so that's the black, red, black ISO danger mark. And the regulatory buoy is closer. It's smaller, but that one is likewise as close as it can get safely through the AIDS navigation team's 49-foot vessel. Remember that all the buoys have watch circle radius. They can only get so close to before they become damaged themselves on any kind of, rock or riprap, get moved by storm or wave action and so forth. And unfortunately, a physical aid that is actually a distant sort of third and fourth option. It's just not something that we can do.
Is there a reason why you can't do it?
Financial mostly, and priorities of all the other places that we need to apply funding to make sure that we can appropriately, mark other places like the jetties that mark, Lewis Bay or Nantucket Sound or Nantucket Harbor and so forth. The best way for us to mitigate is just to reduce the hazard itself, which we put out there a century back, essentially.
Was there a cost, given to like what it would cost to do the day beacon versus just removing the rock pile?
Yeah,
like
it's two to three times the cost from our engineering unit in Providence that does the Coast Guard's engineering work.
Thank you. Any other public comments, Channel 18?
Seeing none.
Hold on. Yes.
Oh, David Lawler, report.
David?
Yep, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make my video and I jumped on late like Jake. He was working. I was forgetting. Thank you. I spoke the last couple of times and I truly appreciate the efforts of, the professionalism of the Coast Guard and the Harbor Master. And again, I'm not going to reiterate everything that I said before. I usually appear before this board in a different capacity and not personally. But to go over the issues of, the safety and having been an experienced boater for my entire life, certainly as a passenger, as a youth, and as a boater since I've probably been 12 years old, and experience. And yes, Colliers does get hit. Generally, they're minor collisions, and there have been some more significant ones, and thank goodness I don't know of any fatalities, though that's always a possibility. But decisions are made upon various things. Safety is obviously a concern. Traffic patterns on 28. There are intersections where people are killed every several years that don't have a green light or red light because they made decisions that it's just going to interfere with the traffic patterns, people getting to work and whatever. And based upon those decisions, sometimes those are trumped. And obviously to those people who are injured in a car accident, that's a terrible decision, but the tens of thousands of people who commute every day, it's a different decision. And, and it's this board, but this board's, mandate is to protect the environment. And obviously you have to take into certain things like personal safety in that as well. But, I do think that you have the authority to deny this, and whether you're overturned or not is something that I think if you do your diligence and preserve this natural resource. I know it's man-made, but I think it was there somewhere in the early pre-Civil War, from what some of the charts look like. Probably the remnants of Bishop's Light going in. That's your task, and I do think. Pete talked about, we can get some conditions, and if we don't, well, those are no guarantee. And if you choose to deny this, there's a very good chance it won't happen. I'm a big believer in that time is the enemy of the deal. And in this particular case, time is the enemy of the project. And I think you would not be denying it in some effort to just delay for the purpose of delay. I think you have a very viable reason that's been presented to you by Mass Fisheries, by Jake, by some of the other fishermen that really know what they're talking about with respect to the habitat of tautog, black bass, squid, and various other species in the area. And and it's hard. Again, I'll end the way I started. I have the utmost respect for some of the people on the other side. One of them is a dear friend and client, Wayne, and I respect his opinion always. The Coast Guard, I know, comes at this, as does the Harbor Master, with the best intentions, and it's a very difficult decision. But I would ask that you deny it, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any more public comment? Channel 18.
Craig Ashworth, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Just to be clear, I didn't hear the response clearly to Jacob that it was 2 to 3 times the cost. Is it 2 to 3 times the cost of placing a day mark on that rock pile? Or is it 2 to 3 times the cost of dredging? I'm just thinking about my familiarity, which is somewhat limited, but it seems to me that the act of dredging that much rubble and stone and transporting it and burying it or replacing it is going to be substantially more than a periodic placement of a day mark.
Yeah, so I did answer it, and I'll clarify further now. 2 to 3 times the cost to remove. We don't put a day mark on top of that pile because we'd have to build the pile back up, which we don't even do anymore in terms of our tech and cost ratios and the reliability that the aid will be there. Replacing it periodically is not in our work plan. It's not on our engineering cycle. If we were to build a day mark on that ledge, it would be to mark the ledge, and we'd clear the rocks to punch steel piles, essentially, for a robust structure that would be there a long time. To be fair, Collier Ledge itself, not the riprap pile, Collier Ledge itself does not warrant that kind of expenditure as a navigational risk mitigation device. So that wouldn't even be part of our calculus. This is really just about having to almost do the same thing. If we're going to put a physical marker there, the bulk of the rocks go away anyway. So, which runs counter to really, I think, all of our collective objectives, certainly for the commissioners, in taking away even more of the habitat just so that we could put a mark on a ledge that is, 10, 11 feet down and was a problem for schooners back in the day, but is not a problem for, the modern boater now.
Thank you.
And has there been a hydrologic study of sand accretion in that area, or that might be changed? That whole area of Hyannis and Hyannisport is building sand at a very steady rate, and changing that and eliminating and altering the wave action and the currents. Is there a potential that if you were to leave this rubble base at a relatively low area, that this wouldn't just become another sand bump? And how does that affect eelgrass down to the lee?
Yeah, and I don't have an answer to that question. To my knowledge, there was not a hydraulics study, unless Christine has information that indicates that was done.
It just seems to me that, I'm sorry, but I'm just a layperson, but it seems to me that this is a very drastic step to take in the absence of some really solid study. That's all I can say at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Channel 18, any more public comments? I think we should wrap this up quick. We spent a lot of time discussing this now.
Seeing none.
None? Christine and Matt, just for the public, I think this is not an easy decisions to make between the habitat and the navigation safety and all that stuff. But I have to trust the Coast Guard and the town's harbor master's judgment on this one. So I'm leaning like Christine and Matt. If we put the following conditions, do you have any issues? Can I read those things out for you?
Yes, please.
1, before you do the work, 2 weeks prior to do the work, you need to coordinate it with harbor master. They need to know. what happened. Second, with the comment that there is a time of the restrictions between April 15 and June 15. I think that's an easy part for you. Thirdly, we would allow you to dredge down to 7 feet below the mean low water. And then after you're done, I'm looking for a bathymetry after you do that dredging, maybe 60 days, 90 days, whatever, to get that, make sure that you are reaching that level of the dredging levels. And then dispose of the material, as you mentioned about go to Yarmouth or Harwich that previously determined the locations for disposal. Is that fair? Yeah, John?
Could you add, based on what Peter said, a recommendation, which we've done, that confer again with the Division of Marine Fisheries, as Peter suggested? That's a recommendation. The condition would be that Lorex would have to be used, within Nantucket Sound to add to or create. So I would agree with your motion.
But in coordination with Marine Fisheries, the deposition of the stuff, do that in coordination with Marine Fisheries.
Fine.
Yeah. But they already mentioned in their letter saying that they go to Yarmouth and the Harwich sites.
But it can't hurt, as Peter suggested, to talk to him again. That's all. And it's a recommendation. That's it.
Yeah. Go and communicate and coordinate that with the Division of Fisheries, that you're going there, or whether they have any other recommendations for the disposal in the Nantucket Sound area.
So are those conditions acceptable to the Coast Guard? Was Tom's question.
Right.
Yeah, so I can speak a little more to that, not on behalf of the contracting officers, because there's some technicalities involved there, but I can say that in general, it is not unusual for the Coast Guard to meet construction windows and to adhere to those rigorously, to advertise appropriately with all of the local stakeholders and agency partners for nav safety and other purposes, for sure. We always expect a post-project survey to be completed in such instances where we're building or removing. And that's, I'm sure, already baked right into the contract. Christine will probably know that off the top of her head. And our intention is definitely to pursue disposal at a ledge, because to be fair, that material has to go somewhere. We want to make it as useful and effective as possible. So I think that addresses all four.
With that, Tom, I would make the motion.
I'll second. Roll call.
Tangney, aye. Sampu,
Nay.
Abadili,
Aye.
Hearn,
No.
Lee.
Aye.
That's 3-2.
The
Passed.
motion is carried by 3-2 majority.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Christine. And thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much for hearing us. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have four NOIs tonight. The first one is Oyster Harbor's Yacht Basins Realty Corp. Proposed maintenance dredging at 122 and 182 Bridge Street, Oysterville, as shown on the assessors map 093, parcel 009 and 027. John.
Good evening, John O'Day from Sullivan Engineering Consulting. I'm here this evening representing the Oyster Harbor's Yacht Basin. We're here this evening seeking your approval for maintenance dredging. We're pulling up the plan for you all that was submitted with this notice of intent. So this is obviously work located at the boatyard, Oyster Harbor's Yacht Basin, Oyster Harbor's Marine, however you choose to refer to it. It's on both sides of the drawbridge heading out towards Little Island in Oysterville. This dredge footprint was most recently approved in 2015 under an order of conditions. And we are just seeking to re-permit that exact footprint and that exact depth. The previously approved depth was -6. There's an area on the east side is where the travel lift is and some of the primary buildings. The intent would be as a larger project, that all the material would be brought over to the west side, offloaded near the rear of the storage buildings, placed into a dewatering area, and then trucked away offsite to a suitable upland location. There may be occurrences when some in-between maintenance is required around just the travel lifts themselves that might be able to be done from the travel lift pad itself. But the primary project, again, would be excavators or cranes from a barge offloading off the land. Material has been tested. It was surprisingly coarse. We were on average less than 10% fines. So we're not expecting any significant turbidity, and for it to dry out and be removable in pretty short order. I think I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, John. We have the DMF letter dated November the 24th. And let me read a couple of things in here for you. Their recommendations for consideration is the time of the year restrictions should be observed between January 15th to June 30th. And the proponent should consult with the Barnstable Shellfish Constable about relocating shellfish within and near the proposed dredging footprint. And DMF recommended the top of the slope be no closer than 25 feet from the mean low water line, and the dredging of the toe of the slope near the mean low water line may result in the slumping of the intertidal habitat. The proposed plan do not meet this recommendation, so take a look at that. And then the other two is the stand language about the, if you require a barge is to be restricted 2 hours before and after the high tide to prevent the barge grounding in the map of shellfish habitat, and the fuel spills from the refilling of the construction equipment will adversely impact the sensitive resource area. Impacts to resource area can be avoided by requiring all land-based equipment not be filled on site. If equipment is refilled on site, adequate containment and cleaner materials should be required to minimize impact. And the town biologist has sent an email, said that she does not have any comment for this project at this point. John,
I may just on the marine fisheries, I should have stated we did go before the Shellfish Committee and also the Harbor Masters Waterways Committee. The only comment that I had on the marine fisheries letter is the 2 hours before, 2 hours after high tide. We are 6 feet deep here at low tide. I don't think that there's any issue with the barge grounding out at any time. So I'm not sure why that would need to be a condition in this area.
Okay. The other question I have though is I think the previous order condition is not closed yet.
I'm aware.
So if we're moving forward, I would put a condition said that you need to request for a closing of the previous order conditions.
Not a problem.
Bill.
Excuse me, Tom.
Oh, sorry, Darcy.
And I don't think we ever got the bathymetric survey either. So we put these conditions in and they're not being adhered to. So do we have a bathymetric study or plan from the last one?
We've been going through the folder that was provided to us. We were not involved with any of the prior efforts out here. The marina was given a binder from the prior consultants. We did not see it in that. I haven't actually, I will need to reach out to the marina and or the contractors to figure out what, if anything, was done under the last iteration of permitting. I think at the very least, we would be able to compare all of these soundings with what had been there before and the dredge footprints to give some indication whether there were any areas of non-compliance. But I don't have the answer to what was done last time we weren't involved, but we can try to help answer that.
Thank you. And then I would just recommend we do have that condition in on this set of conditions too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But definitely you have that conditions. The only question I'm thinking, just speaking out loud, is that, if they don't have the previous bathymetric survey data at this point, it's kind of, to me, maybe meaningless, because you're going to a dredge anyway. After this, maintenance dredging, you need that bathymetrics data to prove where you are. I think that's more critical than the previous one. That's my thought. But Bill.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to periodically dredge this place. I just have a couple of questions. One is, how much is it filled in since, I guess the last dredge was in 2015? And maybe Darcy's comment about not having bathymetric maps or whatever, you can't answer that. But what's the rate of filling? What are you doing? The other question I have is, in the application, it says that you would abide by any silt curtains. And so, have silt curtains been used before? This area basically drains into West Bay, which is an important shellfish habitat. I guess I'm just wondering about the siltation. You're going to dredge a channel like that. I would think a lot of silt would drift down into West Bay. So, thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Bill.
So the two halves of that, I think it's a standard recommendation and condition that, if turbidity becomes an issue, that contractors have those sort of tools available to them to stop work, to have those tools available to them to be implemented to prevent turbidity from leaving the area. Based on the sediment that we've seen here and the grain size and that it's 90+% sand, we don't have this concerns that we might have up in Princess Cove or North Bay, where we're dealing with a much siltier, finer materials. So I don't think, and it is a traveled way and heavily used, so it's not like we can curtain off the whole area without impacting access anyway. So I think that if a pocket was hit, that they could have the tools available to minimize it and mitigate it. And in terms of how much is filled in last time, again, I wasn't involved. I think it's certainly something that we could start looking into as we deal with the certificate of compliance. All these areas that are hatched are areas that are today less than -6. So, did they take every last square inch down to -6 last time? I doubt it. I think that, in these instances, they probably go after the areas of most importance. They've been, very adamant of, the travel lift. The travel lift is our life. We have to, if we have funding for a certain year for dredging and any place needs it, it's going to the travel lift. And then they kind of work their ways out from that. There's also areas that, even though this whole footprint says -6, as marine fish, we're not really dealing with mean low water like mean marine fisheries was says, because we're surrounded by structures. Probably 3/4 of it is a steel or vinyl bulkhead, so you can dig right up next to those. There are areas that are stone revetments that we would sort of maintain an offset or a slope away from to prevent any possible damages to those structures.
Thanks, John. Louise?
Realizing that I am probably in the minority here, I keep hearing, and I'm not putting this on John because I understand John was not involved in the last project, but there's a lot of conjecture in terms of, well, they probably did this and they probably that, and this is probably the way it is, but it just drives home the point to me, at least, that there's a lot of question about, what was done the last time around. And I think that we should gather whatever evidence is available in terms of how the first project came out before we approve the second one. I mean, this is not a situation where there's an independent project that was never closed out, and therefore, and we don't want to involve a judgment on that on the new project. I mean, this project is a direct result of what happened in 2005, or was it 2015?
2015 was the last round of permitting. I think that the commission has gotten much more of a stronghold on those conditions in more recent years, to the point of, we know that if someone wants an extension permit on a dredge permit, which is going to happen in 3 years, we are going to want to keep these things alive as long as possible, because it's very costly for the restarting over. We know that that's, as soon as that letter goes in, that all of these conditions, will have been checked off. I think that when we're typically doing a post-dredge survey, the intent of it is to make sure that the contractors haven't over-dredged anywhere, haven't, created sump holes, haven't given someone more depth than they previously had. The fact that there are all of these areas that need maintenance dredging at this point are still, makes me feel like that wasn't the case anywhere here. We can also sort of follow the contour lines. There's no sump holes like you might see around, somebody's private dock, or I agree. I think it needs to be more heavily monitored, regulated, and we may continue to go through the rest of their records and find this documentation. I don't know, but I think that moving forward, it's a clear understanding that these conditions are expected to be met in order to have these projects continue.
Well, I mean, there's been no closure on the first project, basically. And that's, as I said, I'm probably in the minority here, but I just think that we ought to see how that one came out before we act on this one. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Louise. Any other question from the commissioner? None? Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None? John, I'm going to mention a couple of conditions that I'm thinking. Darcy, correct me if I'm wrong, or Commissioner, if I'm missing anything, just let me know after I've finished that. One, the work cannot start until until John has requested for the COC from the prior filing. The request to close that. And then secondly, notify the harbor master at least 21 days before the dredging work begins. Same thing, at the same time, notify the shellfish biologists as well. And when you're dredging, there is a time of the year restriction between January 15th and June 30th. And when you're dredging the area, you should coordinate with the shellfish biologists in terms of relocating some of the shellfish in that dredging area at the expenses of the projects. And thirdly is the post-metric survey that need to be done. Darcy, what's the time frame? Do we do it like how long do we asking for it? A year?
This is within the year.
Within a year?
Yep.
To get the post-metric survey done. And then the contractor should have the silk curtain be available if necessary for use. Did I miss anything else?
Good
No,
job.
I was just going to say the file number that we need to close out is SE34405, just for the record.
Okay. Bill, you're saying something?
I said, good job, Tom.
Okay.
So Bill, you're gonna make the motion?
Am I? I'll move what Tom just said. Is that what you're saying?
I'll second it.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
No,
Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
Tangney, aye. Passes 5 to
Thank you
1.
very much.
Thank you, John. The next NOI is Courtney C. and Melissa S. Palmer. Proposed constructions of an in-ground swimming pool and fence at 621 Main Street, West Barnstable, as shown on the Assessors Map 132, parcel 013-001. Paul?
Yes, good evening. Just making sure everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. The proposed notice of intent for the applicants at 621 Main Street, West Barnstable, they would like to put in a proposed in-ground swimming pool behind the existing house within the property. The area where they want to put it in is a relatively level area of land.
Paul, can you share this? Can you share the plan?
I will try. I've never done this before, so let's see what happens. Can you see it?
No.
Okay, it's up on my screen and
Yeah,
showing it.
screen.
We have a red share screen up top.
Yeah.
Red share screen up top.
Yeah, usually it's just a share.
Yeah.
I don't think that's happening. I'll come back.
It might be a green button on the bottom.
Oh, it's coming up. Something is coming up. No.
Oh, you go.
Yeah.
So
you're
go
just-
share
you're
with on the other screen.
Yeah, you're just sharing one of your screens, but if you share the other one, like, so if you
Yeah.
click on, yeah. You got one of them.
Just move that figure into this plan, into this monitor.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So basically what we have is the proposed swimming pool, in-ground swimming pool will be at the back of the existing building. If you look at the topography within the site, the swimming pool is going in within a relatively level area. We moved it to that particular area because we've got a slope. You can see the topography sloping down slope to the south. I guess that's the south, to the southwest. And at the bottom slope, we have an isolated wetland, and the flags in the field are A1 through A10. And as soon as the 50-foot buffer zone is this dashed line, I believe, right here. The pool is outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. There's no work proposed within the 50-foot buffer zone. We have a limit of erosion control set at the top of the slope, wrapping around within this area. There is a proposed fence with any in-ground pool. Insurance-wise, there's going to be a fence around it, so we are adding the fence in. At this point, there's no alterations within the 50-foot buffer zone. All alterations will be located within the 50 to 100-foot buffer zone within the property. It's also my understanding, I believe the installers for the swimming pool are on for this particular hearing, that the swimming pool will need, I guess it's a 3-foot wide apron of concrete pavers that go around the edge of the pool, which we will have to add to the plan. That still keeps all work with outside the 50-foot buffer zone. The pavers, they're concrete block pavers, and I believe they're separated so that there's a pervious area between each one of the blocks, so it remains a pervious area, even though the blocks are made of concrete. At this point, we're not asking for a variance because we're outside the 50-foot buffer zone. I'm happy to answer any questions, and that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Paul. Bill?
The NOI says that the wetland may contain vernal pool habitat, and I wondered why we think this.
Well, the reason I did the flagging of the wetlands, and what we have is an isolated vegetated wetland, and it had pooling in it. I was there probably in the beginning of June, and then when I was back there in August, most of the pooling had dried up, but it basically has the ingredients for a vernal pool. It's all sloping land comes down to it. It's an isolated basin. There's no streams into the pond. There's a pool. There's no streams out of this wetland system. And I checked the natural heritage endangered species maps. They have not mapped it as that, but I just add that on because when I see a wetland, it's like, yeah, it's isolated, but it could potentially have it. Now, that being said, the only time to really review for wetland, is it a vernal pool, is during the very limited vernal pool season we have, which is basically from about third week in March till about maybe the second week in May. It is in terms of reviewing for species, but right now it is not classified as a vernal pool by natural heritage. And if you look, only a small portion of this wetland is actually within the subject property. Most of the pool is located to the south of this land.
So as a follow-up, given the configuration of the houses and everything and where the pool is, I guess, I'm not concerned about the pool, but can you put like a 6-inch clearance on the bottom of that pool fence, just in the event, so that, because amphibians that use them migrate out of the pool and they go across the landscape, and just having a barrier is not a good thing, I would say. And so you have the existing shop you can see on the southern end, and the fence kind of goes right along there, just allowing them to move out. Who knows where the hell to disperse, but a 6-inch clearance, is that a reasonable thing to do?
Bill, excuse me, I'm not sure if the town would allow that under the regulations. I just don't know. That's just a question.
May I speak for a second?
Who's this?
This is Jeff Fanar. I'm the pool builder, contractor.
Okay.
Regarding that space but underneath the fence, code in Massachusetts allows you only to have 2 inches.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what I was concerned with. That's all.
Yeah. Well, if the code says 2 inches, then hopefully you'll have 2 inches.
Right. Some building inspectors will let it slide. If 3 inches, they'll let it slide. But what you can do is, I believe that's going to get aluminum fence, which is a little bit wider, so animals can get through it if they have to.
I mean, they're not very big. You're talking about like, spotted salamander and the like, but
right. That should be no problem at all.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Luis?
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
Maybe I missed it, but when I look at a swimming pool proposal, I am used to seeing pool equipment someplace to, maintain the pool, and I don't see any here.
I'm gonna turn that over to the pool installers. That's out of my expertise.
The pool equipment, see where it says existing shed?
Yeah.
It's going to go either to the right of that or just to behind that.
So that should be on our plan, right?
Usually it's put on a plan. We can have it amended by Paul Sweetser and have that put on for you.
Would you please do that for us?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're
And-
welcome.
I'm sorry, Tom, did you say me?
Yes.
Yeah, I walked the property and they have a beautiful undisturbed 50-foot buffer all the way around this wetland. And where they're planning to put this pool is a very high elevation away from, there was actually a family of ducks there today. So the area where they are is closest to the house they can get. They are in a total compliance with all of our regulations, and their undisturbed 50-foot buffer is beautiful, and I hope they maintain that. Thank you. I just wanted to say that.
100%. We
Thank
love
you,
the
Angela.
property.
Pete?
Thank you.
Yeah, sort of in line with, I think it was Louise wondering about the pool equipment. Are we gonna have a drawdown pool or how, when we have to drain this, where is it gonna go? Is that also something we normally see on a map with a pool installation?
Right, so that was actually discussed, and with Mr. Sweetser had originally talked about having a drawdown area, but in the end, we've decided not to do it. That at this point, I believe the applicant wants to, if there has to be water taken down, is to bring a truck in to take it away. Part of the reason was, if we tried to do a drawdown area within this site, we're probably only about 70 feet away from the edge of wetlands. And because of the slope going down to the wetlands, anything we put into the ground is going to go down into that wetland. So we decided that we figured that you folks would not want that. I mean, I do a lot of work on the South Cape Cod. I do a lot of work on the South Shore. Most commissions don't want to have drawdown areas. They actually would rather, they'll make it, it's almost a given on the South Shore, you're taking that water off site.
Well,
So
that makes very good sense, and I just want to make sure it's okay with our permitting. So if Darcy or someone could say that's cool, I'm cool with it.
It's not the usual condition we have. The commission always says to have the drawdown. It's actually shown on your plan.
Yeah, it's showing on your plan. It's a proposed dry well.
But I think, and it could be, I'm sorry, but I thought I put up the most recent plan that I put into the commission. I think if you look at what was submitted, we actually took the drawdown area off once we reviewed it, because there is wetland to the south located downslope from where they want to put the pool. Just on the other side of Route 6A is another wetland on another property. We are just outside the 100-foot buffer zone. If we try to put the drawdown's either going to go to this wetland or to the wetland across the street, and I figured we'd be hitting a hornet's nest before the Conservation Commission.
Well, thank you for mentioning that the drawing that you are sharing has a dry well drawdown pool, but on the drawing that you submitted on the NOI does not have that. So I'm comparing the drawing on my screen versus your screen. So
this is probably the last generation plan before what you folks have. And I'm just looking at that now, I'm like, yeah, that's not supposed to be. No.
Okay. The other questions that Darcy mentioned that we typically would require the distance between the edge of the isolated wetland versus the pool, and the distance between the isolated wetland versus the fence. So in the revised drawing, you should add those dimensions in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And then when you mentioned about a 3-foot apron, you should add that on your revised drawing as well.
Yes. And it will be technically pervious, even though they're concrete block pavers, 3 feet wide.
Right. But then you also need to label your mechanical equipment locations for the in the shed area or behind or right next to it. So
yep.
Any other questions from the commissioner? Seeing none. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None. Could I have a motion to approve this project subject to receipt of a revised plan showing the distance between the isolated wetland and the pool and the distance between the isolated wetland and the fence, and the label of the 3-foot wide paver around the pool, and they make a label on the mechanical equipment storage area.
So moved.
What about a 2-inch clearance on the fence?
Yeah, you need, install a 2-inch clearance according to this building code.
Excuse me, Tom?
Yep.
You're gonna have to add a special condition if you're gonna allow them to truck the water off, because that isn't what we usually do. It's gonna have to be voted by the commission that that's okay, because that's not the boilerplate that I use.
Well, also, Darcy, I was thinking about it. I think in the past when this has come up, there's been a concern that, you know, suddenly someone new comes on the scene and
Yeah.
they don't truck it out. They just
The hose goes down and goes into the wetland, so.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not sure the trucking out is such a great alternative.
Hmm. Can the commission do a continuing condition on it that it be trucked out? Because this is just not the site for a drawdown pit.
No, I'm gonna add that into the conditions to allow these locations to not have a drawdown pool and truck the water out from the pool if necessary.
Correct. Thank you.
I think that would work, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are the conditions that I have it in there.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Yes. Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
And Tangney. Aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you
Thank
all
you.
very much.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for your
I
time.
really appreciate you. Thank you.
Channel 18, can we have a 5-minute break?
Sure, no problem.
So right now it's 8:16. Let's come back on the 8:20. Is Luis here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Pete?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Channel 18, can we start?
All set.
Thank you. The next NOI is Stephen S. and Crutchins K. Bates, trustee, 102 Bridge Street, Realty Trust, to demolish the existing single-family dwelling. The existing attached garage will remain and construct new single-family dwelling, pool, and all associated purposes at 102 Beach Street, Austinville, as on an Assessors Map 116 Parcel 001. John?
Good evening, John O'Day from Sullivan Engineering Consulting, representing the applicants. I'll bring the plan up for you all.
John?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. What is our jurisdiction here? I need to understand that before you start.
Flood zone.
Flood zone only.
Flood zone only.
Okay, thank you, John. Sorry to interrupt you.
Not a problem. You're only one or two sentences ahead of me. This is a quarter of an acre on Bridge Street. We're about 350 feet, give or take, to the bays in either direction, West Bay or North Bay, over to behind the Oyster Harbors Marine that we were just here for you. We're developed the single family dwelling. This is flood zone only. We're looking to demolish the dwelling. The existing garage that's kind of the right hand side of the structure is going to stay there. The new dwelling is going generally in the area of the existing. In the backyard, a little swim spa is proposed, upgrading a septic system, taking care of our roof drains. Hopefully this is a pretty straightforward project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions from the commissioner?
Can I just, I'm sorry, I didn't want to complicate this whole thing, but I just have a question about our guidelines for filing in flood zones. That's a top of wall going all the way around the property, right?
This is a wall here, 2 to 3 feet. There's kind of a wall existing along the edge of the drive on this side. I don't believe that, and we put it into the narrative, that we're not within a velocity zone or a moderate wave action area, as mapped by FEMA, which is when I would think might trigger some of those additional guidelines the commission has for flood zones.
Okay. Then you answered my question. I just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of that. And I just noticed that wall when you brought the plan up. So thank you.
Good point.
Good point. And the wall, the top of the wall elevations at the 11th. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None. So John, we're gonna, this approval is approved from the Concom for this project and not on the septic, because your septic system has to go in front of the Board of Health. So that's a separate issue. So just want to mention it. Could I have a motion to approve this project as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Sampu,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Abadili,
Aye.
and Tangney, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you, John.
Very much.
The last NOI is Ted and Dorsey Tencom. Rents and replace existing single-family dwelling at 797 Old Post Road, Contwood, as shown in the Assessors Map 073, Parcel 008-002. Dan?
Good evening, Chairman. I know it's a long night. I'll try and be brief in my remarks, and Ian Peach will just say a few words from Wilkinson. The owner, Ted Titcomb, is in the audience as well. I'll pull up my screen to share. This is an old home on the Three Bays system. We're in the Cotuit Narrows. You can see it's heading up into North Bay. It's on the north shore there. So take a little bit of waves from the bottom. There's an old revetment that was SE 2439 that wraps around the important part of that. So the bank is quite stable. It's a vegetated slope. There are some invasives and plants on there that are not as desirable for a natural community. So we're going to be working on that. The home, we had put in the initial that it was a raise and replace. It's really the bones are good, and he's saving the home, the chimney, lifting it up a little bit, redoing the basement, and an addition. Most of that that I've described is outside of your jurisdiction, but some is within, and then we're doing a stone terrace out front. So you've got the existing conditions here. Immediately adjacent to Coastal Bank, there's a kind of a Cape Cod lawn, a couple of chairs. It's a very serene environment. All the trees, pine trees, grove there. It's not a bare site like some of them you see. It's very well maintained as a pseudo, somewhat natural environment. We are tearing down the sunroom and the terrace that's there and putting a little bit larger stone terrace, again, all outside of the 50. There's going to be an area drain to a dry well for that. Very small spa, almost 100 feet away from the wetland up here. The spa equipment is going outside of your jurisdiction there, and we can utilize the roof dry well system if there's any little drawdowns of that required. Again, it's a very small volume. And again, dry wells all along the front and around the back. There's an outside of your jurisdiction there for the driveway. There's a drainage system as well, a deep sump-putted basin and leaching for that. Because we do have a somewhat disturbed 50-foot buffer, you do look at the mitigation calculations. Those are on the plan here. We broke them out as Darcy likes very specifically. We're adding about 997 of hardscape in the 50 to 100. Again, 0 within the 50-foot buffer. This does have a pier that we have a easement for on the neighboring property that's properly licensed. But we don't have anything else, and that's water dependent, obviously, within the 50-foot buffer on our lot of hardscape. So the 0 to 50 is clear, all zeros existing and proposed. We're adding 997, so times 3, that'd be 2991. And we've got about 6636 square foot of mitigation between the careful removal of invasives and replanting per the Wilkinson plan. We've got a nice multiple of what you even need. Forget the 3, it's about 6. So that plan is here. Ian can probably speak to that a little bit, and I know the hour is late, so we'll try and be brief. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll share my plan and just review the good work we're proposing here. So I'm hoping my plan is now on Commissioner's screen.
Yep.
For the record, Ian Peach from Wilkinson Ecological Design, representing the applicant and the project for Wilkinson. So this proposed ecological restoration plan before you is offering 6,636 feet of mitigation on the coastal bank. And as you can see in our plan, we've broken it out into 2 areas. The first of these areas are areas in this hatch that you see around with these different islands in the areas above here and along here. This hatch is showing areas that are really in need of native seed and planting of native shrubs. It's also areas where there is an intensive invasive plant management needed. So that we really found 2 types, and that's what the 2 hatches are showing. The second area, the second hatch that runs across the face of this very steep coastal bank is something that would benefit what we call early detection rapid response, or in other words, we've got moderate populations of species like Scotch broom, Asiatic bittersweet, autumn olive, shrub and vine honeysuckle, black locust seedlings and saplings, and they're starting to colonize the bank. So it's a really opportune time, optimal time to do that comb through and make sure we're protecting the existing native plant communities on the coastal bank. The restoration plan for the benefit of wildlife, native plant diversity, and water quality, we're proposing 67 native shrubs, 7 different species, 2 native mid-canopy trees, as serviceberry, and then of course all areas will be seeded with a deep-rooted native grass to help stabilize this steep bank where we do have existing bare areas and to filter and infiltrate that stormwater runoff. I should also note we're offering this supplemental specification just with some workhorse maritime shrubs that we find would be optimal for this condition. Should we find through this work there are further voids that could use native woody shrubs? It was noted, but I do want to make sure I speak to it briefly. In the 0 to 50, it's densely canopied, native pitch pines and oaks. They offer wind and shade protection that's valued by the homeowner. And the project is specifically seeking to respect the value of these trees. So we're only removing one single dead pitch pine in that 0 to 50 buffer. And really there's approximately 50 native canopy trees that'll be preserved in the buffer and on the bank. So a robust number of canopy trees in a small amount of area. And just want to highlight that point that the homeowner is simply seeking to preserve that fully filtered, fully canopied, limited under canopy view, which this property has with that nice Cape Cod lawn that's existent. We did find areas all along that were less vegetated where we really could amplify and uplift them with more native plants just to increase that. But we have a wonderful canopy here. So one last thing I want to speak to, as you'll see on our plan, I believe you're familiar with it. We are proposing coppicing, a strategy we've used successfully in Barnstable and on the Cape. It's a rotational strategy where you'll see in this cloud here and here right above the revetment, we've got densely clustered, historically managed, predominantly oaks. We've got 5 smaller oaks and 1 red maple, and they get rotationally coppiced, which is they get flush cut initially, and then there's a nice rigorous regrowing of multiple stems into that shrub-like form with biomass. In subsequent years, through our maintenance throughout the order, we select the most healthy and vigorous shoots, especially with species like oak and this red maple, to keep and prune away the least healthy and just maintaining that 10-foot height. So you really will maintain that nice biomass in these locations. There's also a little bit of a concern here allowing some of those trees to get to full size that close to the revetment. There could be a kind of a lever situation that we're trying to avoid. So we really think coppicing is a way to keep that biomass on site, the habitat value, and still keep those roots in the bank for a very, very steep bank. So I hope I moved a little quickly. As Dan said, it is getting late, but I'm happy to speak to any of these management techniques or the overall approach. And I hope you see that we're aiming for light touch, thoughtful, and to just kind of increase the benefit to the resource area on site. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ian. Louise?
You mentioned that only one tree is being removed, and you said in the 50. When I was there I counted 8 that were marked. Presumably, now maybe some of those were in the 50 to 100. I don't know, but my sense was that more than one tree was going to be removed.
Yes, so there's only one dead pitch pine to be removed, shown here in red in the 0 to 50. The other trees you were seeing were likely due to construction in the 50 to 100.
Okay, so there are more trees that are going to be removed is the bottom line.
Yes, we're retaining over 50 canopy trees in here. The ones shown here and are better represented on Dan's plan are to do with the construction project.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Bill?
Yeah, I appreciate the owner's good stewardship of the land and leaving all of those trees and whatnot. I sometimes think, though, what happens when they sell the property? You never know. In the future, is there some plan to mark the mitigation area, especially that area up on the northwest, northeast side? Some kind of fence or stone markings or whatever?
We had not specified this, but we've certainly worked with your commission and I believe others to have things that more memorialize the edge of the area. Yeah. And I'm sure we would be open to that.
Good, thanks.
Typically, we would require a demarcation line for the mitigation planting area, so we know what the area is for mitigations. So, yeah. John?
Yeah, must have walked in a different property or something, but I know it wasn't because I was with the owner. But if you look at that, there is a very steep bank, which is not significantly vegetated, and it is full of invasives. Removing the invasives is great, but literally the moss line, grass line goes right up to the top of that bank, and there is not one bush along the top of that bank. And Darcy, help me out, but what are our regulations? Do we allow or do we consider invasive removal to be mitigation where there is in fact no buffer at all in an area like that?
I believe I don't know if it's specifically spelled out, but your chapter 704 does recommend that they come up with a planting plan. And I always kind of advise consultants that you really need to offer the mitigation to make a nice, healthy strip going across the whole top of especially an expansive bank like that. And one of the reasons is the invasive removal is all and good, but if the property sold, somebody doesn't want to continue with the invasive work later on, and then somebody else comes in, we lose that chance to have that buffer strip going all the way across, and that would be demarcated. There would be a special condition for the buffer strip to remain and protect that area for any runoff from the lawn area. So I agree with John completely on this. I've been out to this property many times before, and I remember, if they ever come through with a permit, that it would be great to make sure we get some added buffer strip to that lawn area.
Thank you, Darcy. Again, when I walked out there, and I did discuss with the homeowner, I know he has some concerns with what I'm about to say, but I just think that literally, in order to expand this house on that beautiful property, we need to have some mitigation plantings along the top of that buffer. Certainly, access would not be an issue. I'm not talking about something that would not allow access to it. Also, by the way, there was a cement platform out there of the existing seating area, which is fine. I mean, I don't have a problem that's pretty de minimis, but I was actually surprised with the Seth Wilkinson plan that didn't recognize that, given the history of dealing with Seth Wilkinson's organization. The recognition that it is a steep bank, it is not particularly heavily vegetated. You're going to remove invasives on that. You're going to do coppicing of some of those bushes, which I have a little bit of trouble with. And not one plant is being offered along the top of the coastal bank in a waterway that I'm very familiar with because I live near there. That is in fact in deep trouble. So I really have a lot of problem with that. Also, when I walked the property, looked at where the new porch is going to go, the house is going to go, I am not sure that all 8 trees that you're proposing to take down are because of the construction needs or where the house is going to go. So I would sure want prior approval before any tree is removed by the staff, just to confirm that. If it is in the way of construction or a danger to the house, I would agree with it. But I'm not sure that that's the case. So that's my comment. And again, I don't know if the other commissioners walked this property, but it's really bare all the way up to the top of the bank.
Thank you, John. Bill?
Yeah, thank you, John Abadili. I did not visit that, and this is just, I feel bad that I didn't. I'm behind you, John. I support what you say completely.
Thank you.
Any other comment from the commissioner? None?
Tom, excuse me, and just one more comment based on what, I did talk to Darcy about this thing. It kind of runs contrary to our own regulation, or the way we've interpreted that regulation over the years, right, Darcy?
Yes, I agree. I think if they total up how much mitigation comes up, a lot of that has to be the mitigation plantings going in. And then if there's a reason they can't fit in the mitigation plantings, then we start looking at the restoration of the bank.
Right.
Because we don't put a special
to
condition in that they must maintain the restoration of that bank years and years and years from now. And then, you could get the invasives back into that bank, and then you've lost a chance for your buffer strip on the lawn area.
Thank you, Darcy and John.
Yeah, so let me just share my screen again real quick. The you saw from the back of the notice that the photographs there. So and it's a Cape Coddy lawn, so this isn't a turf grass. It's a fescue. It's a very I doubt he ever fertilizes it because it's just that natural an area, kind of a park-like setting. But yeah, we could certainly look at a little strip along the edge there, and make it work. But this is, it's a stately property. It's probably been this way for close to 100 years, and I think that we're going to be getting a nice benefit to retaining all these trees. You've got it on record now, all the trees that are there, they can never be cut down without your permission. And then what would we say, like about a 6-foot strip all across, Darcy? Would that be reasonable? In addition to what we've done already? I mean, that I think, you can just tell by looking and looking across, other people have clear cut, and they have, the golf course and everything is clear cut down to this is a very natural site. There's a big bank there. Wilkinson is exceptionally good at stabilizing those slopes and making sure that everything is good. Plus a 6-foot strip all across the top. I think that would be a winner. Wouldn't you guys concur with that?
Darcy, what do you think?
I'm not agreeing to a 6-foot strip. I think that's up to the commissioners, but I think you have an expansive lawn and more can go in.
Tom, well, you got the others. Pete and Angela and Luis have their hands up.
Yeah, Pete.
Yeah, so it's been a cared for understory. So yes, I'm thankful that it's not a green lawn. I'm very thankful for all the trees that are there. I'm thankful that there hasn't been fertilizer put on the ground, but it certainly has been kept very clean. Similar to the bank, it's fairly clean. So getting, as Mr. Ojala has mentioned, a bunch more woody vegetation, especially in a buffer at the top of that bank, as Commissioner Abdili said, I'm 100% behind that. Now, whether it's 6 feet, 8 feet, whatever, I'm waiting for other commissioners to be adding into this. Thank you.
Luis?
I'm in complete agreement about having a buffer across the length of the top of the bank. I would be interested in knowing what the calculation would be based on the proposed incurrence into the 50 to 100, and then how does that work out in terms of the width of the strip?
Through the chair. I really do appreciate these comments. And just to clarify from a ecological design perspective, we definitely looked very carefully at this bank first, from an invasive plant standpoint, from a native plant community standpoint, from a protection of water quality, and from a stabilization. There are strange areas of really bare areas that are both nurseries for invasive plants and also potential for runoff. So we definitely wanted to create a really thoughtful, detailed plan around that. What you see, that other hatch, was finding areas that were either bare or just duff, completely unvegetated, that we wanted to work towards. And I definitely hear the commissioners loud and clear, and we've done so successfully, really with leveraging thoughtful plant design, finding that buffer width that makes sense for everybody and meeting your standards on many projects. So I don't want you to think that we weren't weighing the different things on that. We wanted to definitely come before you, show you what we were finding here, what the kind of cultural goals of the site were, where we could uplift it. And this is, of course, a conversation where we find compromise to end with a better project. So I do just want to make sure, especially hearing some of the comments, that you understand how we think about this is certainly all looking for that net benefit. And of course, there's often is a conversation to look for a little bit more. And that's something, we're certainly well equipped to do as well. So appreciate everybody's feedback this evening.
Thank you, Ian. Before I go
could I just finish?
Yeah.
The other comment is, I agree with John. In fact, I did mention earlier that it seemed like there's a lot more than one tree getting removed. We ought to make sure that the ones that are marked for removal are absolutely necessary for the construction or for safety of the new structure. And you can do that, right, Dan?
Yeah, we can certainly do that, and you can note that there is one oak that's staying right, pretty close to the house there. For the safety of the house, a pine tree isn't the best thing to have, right against the home. But we'll certainly look at that and see if we can save another one or two. And just for round figures, you're probably, if you line that lawn with a 6-foot strip, you'd be looking at about another 1,000 square foot of mitigation right there. So that's a substantial gain, I think, for the site. And then, a condition that no fertilizer be utilized, and you've got photographs on record showing that it's not a turf lawn. So if it stays that way, I think the river will be very well protected, and it'd be a win-win.
Just to get back to the trees, Dan, I counted there were 8 that were marked for removal.
Yeah,
Louise, my count was about the same as yours, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, if you look at the difference between the existing and the proposed, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, you got it. And a couple of those are within the construction and very, very close to it. We can certainly take a look at the other 2 to 3 that are beyond the construction envelope and not that one diseased one that really is dying anyway. So we'll look at that.
So, so I know, Dan, you mentioned about 6, and I understand Darcy, they not like that 6. So I'm thinking of 8, just flow of a number for discussions. And let me go to Bill.
Yeah, on the Wilkinson plan, there was a large amount of mitigation over on the northeast side. But then right along the bank, looked like the top of the bank, there was this very skinny mitigation. And I wondered, how wide is that? Because there really is a plan to put some vegetation along there. How wide is that? And I guess what we're probably talking about is a continuation of that further to the left, to the western side. So my question is, what was that? What was that very thin band that was running along there on the plan?
It is varied. I could bring it back up. By my measurement, we're looking at, that's about at its thinnest, 4 to 5, and then it has all sorts of variation. It almost doesn't get thinner than 3. So that was specifically like that other hatch, trying to capture areas that could, that were just not even Cape Cod lawn, either like unvegetated, bare, and really were just obvious candidates. So I think logically, yes, massaging that is where we would start from a design perspective. Absolutely.
So I'm thinking is what John Abadili looking for is essentially widening that to whatever X feet, 6 feet, 8 feet, or whatever. I mean, is that where you're looking, John?
No, sir, not quite, Bill. Again, if you looked at it, literally where the seating area is along the whole top of the coastal bank before it drops, and it drops significantly, there was not one bush. There's nothing. It is literally bare. Right. And so I think the 8-foot strip along there, allowing clear access, obviously, to wherever they want to walk.
But isn't that the same place? Excuse me, isn't that the same place that's on the Wilkinson plan that is like 3 feet wide or whatever?
I couldn't see that on the plan. And again, maybe I'm not reading the plan correctly, and maybe Ian can address that. But what I was talking about, so you tell me maybe it is, maybe Bill's right. If you look at along the top of the coastal bank, from left to right, there is nothing.
That's right.
And if you had a picture, if we had a picture, you could see that, Ian. And it's along the top of the coastal bank that is, in my opinion, critical for runoff from the rain runoff, et cetera, is critical planting area.
So
So I think that 8-foot shrub, I'm sorry, go ahead, Louise.
It'll probably also protect from erosion running down the bank, which is sensitive.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not in great shape now, but bushes up there will protect it to some extent.
And not block a view in any way, and not block access in any way, so I respect where the homeowner was coming from in that.
Yeah.
But it would be a wonderful protection to that water body, which is in desperate need of it.
Tom, I just wanted to mention one thing. If they're talking about if there's already like a 3-foot strip, I don't see any shrubs that would have been in that strip.
I didn't either, Bill, and that's why I was.
It would have to be like a plan that would show that you have shrubs, not just different kind of grasses that you're putting in. I would want to see a healthy strip that would at least be two shrubs deep.
But that's what
I
we're
don't know
talking
what
about.
that would be. You'd want the different complexities of plants and everything in demarcation.
Right. Right.
Yes, through the chair, I believe I'm hearing everybody. And so, what we've found here, certainly these are 10 sweet fern, a woody shrub, Carolina rose. These shrubs are shown along here, and then obviously it gets wider. But what I'm understanding, and as Commissioner Abadili is absolutely correct, there is the topography just drops off there. So in terms of flat ground, this is not carrying much into the above bank condition. So what I'm hearing is for the buffer strip to be wider with these similar kinds of native shrubs that don't always impact the view, but still have all those good benefits and can really blend successfully with a grass buffer, as we've done before in this area. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes,
I think yes.
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 Thank you. Thank you.
And also, just to reiterate too, if you look at the Down Cape plan or that dark hatching, from the area that we tagged as lawn, there is some areas almost 15 to 20 feet that we've revegetated with Wilkinson's plan, from where we scoped the edge of Cape Cod lawn to where the plants would come back to. So especially on the north, we already provided a pretty substantial buffer there, but to John's point and so forth, it was a little thin on the rest of it. So to widen that out to 8 feet, we'll be happy to do that. Buff it up a little bit more on that north, and I think we've got a win-win situation.
So, Commissioner, before I go for the public comment, it sounds like we are on a continuance track for the revised plans. Is that right?
I think so, unless Darcy wanted to take it on, but.
No.
Nope.
Yeah.
Continuance.
I mean, we got to have time to look at what trees are being, I don't know whether you're asking Dan to,
we'll take
investigate
another
what
look at if
trees
we
have
can
to be
save any more
removed near the
trees.
building, or you're asking staff to go out there and verify what trees need to be removed for.
May I answer that? I again, it was hard. I went with the homeowner where the porch is going to go and all, and it looked to me just like Louise said that there were some of those 8 trees that really would not be impacted or in any way a danger to the house or whatever. They're pretty healthy trees too. So Dan, if you looked at where the foundations would be, where the house would be, and then identify the trees that are necessary to remove. I mean, I think Dan, couldn't you do that, or Ian?
We absolutely can take another hard look at that. And again, it's outside of the 50 where you give us a little bit more leeway, but we're happy to do that. And if we can save a couple, we'll certainly do it and report back with the wider buffer. Happy to take a brief continuance. We should be able to get that work done fairly quickly.
Okay, thanks. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None. Then how much time do you think you need? Our next hearing is December the 3rd, and the following one is December the 10th.
Unless the owner has a strong objection, I think the 10th would be more comfortable to make sure we get all our ducks in a row and you guys have a week to look at it.
Okay. Could I have a motion to continue in this applications to December the 10th?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Tangney, aye. Sampu,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much for your consideration. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Dan, please don't forget to send in the continuance request form to Kim.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
And then the next item is the enforcement orders. New Rushy Marsh Realty LLC, 1541 Main Street, contoured map 017, parcel 007, alteration of a wetland resource area, vegetated wetland and flood zone, and alterations of the buffer to a wetland resource area, vegetated wetland by cutting vegetation, placing fill and regrading without a permit, and failure to comply with an order conditions / approval plan of record. And this item was tabled from October the 15th. Before I open this, I want to check for Pete. Were you part of the conversation in the last hearing on the October the 15th?
You can check the records, but I thought I heard that Rushy Marsh stuff.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure you heard it, so you're part of the quorum. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I checked. He did come in at that. He was in for that.
Okay. Thank you. Sean or Mike?
Sure, I'll start, Mr. Chairman. Mike Ford for the applicant. This came before you on show cause hearing for enforcement order. We had a robust discussion about the two concepts of restoration versus replication as a solution. And the commission was kind enough to allow us some time to put together a conceptual plan of what we were actually talking about in terms of replication versus restoration. And so we've worked to put that together and would like to present that to you tonight and have a discussion regarding that before the commission gives us direction as to which way to go. So with that, if I could turn it over to Sean, he could present he and Ian a more conceptual plan than what we were simply talking about last time out with respect to replication. Sean?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Sean Reardon on behalf of the landowner. One of the big takeaways from our meeting last time was that one of the things that the commission and the staff wanted to see was some restoration in place, an effort to do that. And Ian and I went out to the site with every intention on trying to figure out the best way to do that. And the struggle we came away with was we kept coming back to the same conclusion that every bit of effort that we did in that area could be counterproductive to the sort of the overall benefits that we're seeking. So our proposal really puts forth what we perceive to be the best possible outcome from the situation that we're currently in. By no means was it any way sort of minimizing the comments. In fact, we went out there specifically with the thought of, okay, how can we restore some of this area? But we kept coming back to some basic principles was, first of all, obviously the less work we do in a different zone, the less trauma to the landscape, the less potential for impact during construction. We struggled with the fact that the area that we're looking to restore, is heavily populated with Phragmites, and Ian can explain the biology better, but I understand from the wetland scientists that those, I think they call them rhizomes, are just so strong and so difficult to manage that anything that we do to restore that area is likely to get sort of taken over by those Phragmites despite our best efforts. Then combined with, we were proposing at least a 1.5 to 1 mitigation ratio that everything that we didn't restore, we'd be creating 50% more wetland somewhere else. And I think what Ian and I agree is a better location, both because it's sort of it allows us to create that habitat connection, and also is away from the driveway, which is sort of a less bucolic section of the property. And then the fact that that didn't mean we couldn't improve it. So our proposal includes a restoration of the planting that same footprint. So instead of actually digging out the area and digging out all that volume to reestablish the hydric conditions, we would plant out to that original wetland boundary line with, you know, a robust understory of planting that would sort of mimic the boundaries of that original condition, but not involve all the excavation and actually plant species that you can withstand the encroachment from the Phragmites. So basically, you're returning the value that was lost, but not sort of excavating all that work instead. With that, I just, if I could share my screen, I'll just share the components of what we're proposing. Let me know when you can see this.
Yep. Please.
As a refresher, you know, this is the driveway coming in off of Main Street. This is the existing pond in front of the Japanese pavilion. This is the large pond that's right off of Main Street. This is the existing sculpture. That sculpture was approved in an amendment to the Japanese pavilion. At the time, unknowingly, it was in an area that had been filled 5-6 years earlier. And, you know, our fault for not having caught that, but, you know, it was an approved installation, although it was partially in a filled area. And then this area here, this about 3,000, just over 3,000 square feet, is the fill that occurred this past year, and that is the focus of our efforts. And let me see if I can go to the next. This is part of the materials that we provided. This is the first part of our mitigation proposal, which is to take all the area that was at one time a wetland, and instead of digging it out and replacing it with other sort of wetland species and allowing it to sort of the Phragmites to encroach, we would leave the fill in place and instead plant the entire area with a sort of a selection of appropriate plants and shrubbery that Ian would recommend that would provide the same value, if not more value than what was originally there. Then the bigger, and there's a section of what we're proposing. So this right now is a lawn all the way to the edge of the BBW, which is all Phragmites. We would remove all that lawn and replace all that area that was once the wetland with a complex of appropriate planting.
Sean, if I may, just to add a little bit of depth to the envisioned planting there and the opportunity, I think just while we're on this area, this would be a complete lawn removal, which it is now, something that we definitely know how to do well, and replacing with not just native shrubs as shown, but that herbaceous species later knit together that's going all the way under the oaks to sort of amplify their benefit as well. We've started to do some draft plant list thinking, and we really feel like it's an opportunity to steer it towards a lot of really interesting facultative wetland shrubs and steer both the herbaceous species and the shrub layer to different stature, going right up to the oaks and down to lower shrubs, where we're going to be able to utilize kind of a unique level of diversity that would be a benefit to pollinators and definitely to wildlife. So just looking at that as that full lawn removal and bringing in a really nice, well-designed, specifically pointed restoration planting or ecological restoration, thinking ecologically about these plants and about their layers while still keeping the willows in place. So not having to remove the willows and lose that tree mass and benefit and early season pollinator support. So that's where we see the opportunity from an ecologically planting standpoint in this area.
And one of the sort of key benefits of that too is all of that work would be done essentially by hand. So the level of invasion, the level of equipment that would have to be involved is much less intensive than what it would take to excavate the area. And again, this whole area is in buffer zone to either the pond or the adjacent. So that's the idea here, is to sort of, yes, we've lost about 3,500 square feet of wetland and wetland vegetation, but we're looking to replace an equivalent area with an appropriate selection of similar vegetation. And then let's go up to the other section this is where the bulk of our proposal is. This is the area further down Main Street. So this is a pond here that the fill took place on the other side. So as you come further down Main Street towards the end of towards Penquixet and towards the end of the cul-de-sac, we have a large paddock area that currently right now is a fenced paddock with grass all around it. What our proposal is to, instead of mitigating or instead of restoring the wetlands over in the other location, is to instead restore the wetland here. We did some recent test pits out there, found that groundwater is consistently about 18 inches below grade. So really well suited for a wetland restoration. This entire area is wetland. This is the wetland mitigation that was done by the town as part of the Main Street work. That's suffering a little bit, that we would be willing to incorporate into our monitoring plan and our maintenance plan. Then the other benefit was if you recall, we had a fairly robust level of extra planting as part of the mitigation for the Japanese pavilion, that rather than that just sort of hanging out by the edge of the pond, we can use it as a distinct buffer between the new wetland and the remaining paddock. And here's a good section to see sort of the net improvement that we can make in this area, which is take this existing paddock area, remove it down and create a wetland habitat, as well as a robust buffer zone. Let's see if I can get up to the other section. And this is where the mitigation planting for the Japanese pavilion would be. So really creating a nice opportunity to tie into the existing mitigation area from Main Street, to do the wetland offset at a 1.5 to 1 for the fill that took place, and then to really have a really appropriate use for the mitigation planting that we owe the commission as part of the Japanese pavilion.
And Sean, if I may just add, if it's an opportune moment, just while we're looking at this area, you may have remembered on our last conversation, we studied it from a landscape ecology perspective. And one of the big moves here, of course, is this paddock really narrows the wildlife passage up against Main Street. So one of the great opportunities here is thickening that buffer, thickening the corridor is at a larger scale. When we zoom in and discovered we're at only 18 inches and that we have this opportunity to really bring in a whole suite of species that would be wetland species, wetland buffer species, facultative wetland species, obligate wetland species, that we really have a palette that is very unique, I would say. So an amazing chance for ecological uplift. And when we studied it in section, it really shows that, and it shows that clear connection from wetland to wetland buffer to replicated wetland to upland. And in adding in that Japanese pavilion mitigation, we're adding in also other, the XY axis, we're getting different kinds of edges, ecotones. So you have upland margins, wetland margins. So from all axes, as we looked at it, this really is an exciting opportunity. Of course, not to mention, I could go back to the photo at some point. It's just an absolute paddock as lawn. So we're definitely taking something with very low value and going to the whole other end of the spectrum. And we want commissioners to understand and administrators and agents that we absolutely respect how you're responding to us on this. But in the door being opened as this is an opportunity and seeing this as a landscape ecologist and restoration ecologist, there just is an opportunity here. And I'll speak a little bit more because I know there was a question maybe a little bit later on about, okay, well, these wetland replications are going to fail, or, you're going to do it and it's going to fall off. And I can speak a little bit more to that, in closing, but I do want to make sure while we're on this, just to highlight that wildlife corridor, that grass paddock to a very specifically, thoughtfully designed wetland with lots of ongoing monitoring, maintenance, and stewardship. And really, I think this project, especially this section, but being paired with the first area we talked about, with the getting rid of all that grass, getting the species in there, working those two together, I think we're looking at a lot of net benefit And we're looking at something that, especially with the replication, could offer a very interesting model that we're happy to report on. And as you know, Wilkinson designs, permits, and implements these things as well as monitors. So we'd be along for the whole ride. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, and one other thing too is, for those who've been out there, stark difference between the two sides, right? As you come in along the driveway, the Phragmites are like a wall of Phragmites along that edge of the pond. There are very few, if any, on this side. So in terms of the ability to maintain this sort of restoration or replication, we're not going to be constantly fighting that encroachment. Just to summarize sort of the engineering side of it for me, the difference between the two possibilities, one, you're doing an in-place restoration versus doing something like what we propose. If we go the replication route, we're going to net out at least 3,000 square feet of additional wetland. And by the time that Ian's done with it, I would expect it to be highly sort of well-developed and well-thought wetland. We're going to end up with 4,500 square feet of additional vegetated buffer that doesn't exist today and wouldn't be provided under a restoration plan, because instead of vegetated buffer, we'd have a wetland restoration. And then we'd have about 7,000 square feet more site subject to jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. So, additional area subject to protection. So we net out, a substantial extra area of both wetland, buffer zone planting, and jurisdiction. So from our standpoint, it's just a win-win. Now, we're certainly open to any other considerations, but Ian and I, after spending a bunch of time on the site and walking through and going through all the options, we just wanted to put forth what we thought was the best proposal for the situation at hand, given what's done is done, and we're just looking to move forward as smoothly and as efficiently as possible.
Thank you, Sean. I don't want to belabor the point, but just out of respect for what Conservation Agent Ed Hoops was speaking to about wetland replications failing or languishing, I've looked at some of the literature, and in my experience, it seems that one of the primary reasons is because maintenance and monitoring is not done as deeply, thoughtfully, and the critical thing, as continuously as necessary. So it's really a temporal relationship, a long-term temporal relationship. Often they're part of something that has energy at the beginning, and then it falls off. And that critical maintenance, monitoring, and adaptive management. So for example, if Joe Pye weed is thriving, let's steer towards Joe Pye weed and do more Joe Pye weed. If buttonbush is not doing well there, let's steer towards clethra. Let's use the reference ecosystems indicators nearby that, in studying what we're not even in our proposed area, but what we're seeing is thriving. That's how we think about design. That's how we think about the adaptive management. And that's, I think, one of the key ways that we could commit to make this move into that category of a successful replication, which I know there were some concerns. So I appreciate everybody's time. Obviously, we wanted to think about this deeply, and we certainly had something to say. I know this is the end of the agenda. But just in closing, I think, we really feel like this affords the best protection to existing resource areas and buffers. It provides the greatest net return for that high ecological value, more wetland, more vegetated buffers, less lawn, substantially less lawn condition, more jurisdictional area, and definitely more habitat value and wildlife corridor. And we're trying to find the areas where we really thought there was opportunity for this uplift. We're not just trying to grab at things. This is here, this is existent, this is definite potential. We want to respect your process and opinions, but this is what we're bringing for you and before you, and we hope the commission sees where there's really strong potentials here, and we can find a way forward. So thank you for your time at the end of the agenda this evening, and I think both Sean and I, and maybe Mike might have something in closing, are here to work with you.
Agreed.
Who wants to speak, Sean or Mike?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll start. Obviously, this is not a plan that could be approved. This is a concept. And I think where the commission is to give us direction. Are you looking for a complete restoration on the other side of the pond? Or are you willing to entertain returning that or making that into buffer, as Sean pointed out, and put the wetland, which would be replication as opposed to restoration, on this side? And I think that if the commission has some interest in this, then we would need to draft a much more detailed plan and proposal and bring it back to the commission for review. And we need to think about that from a procedural standpoint. I know last time I threw out that perhaps you could have an enforcement order, and then maybe the new replication is brought in under an NOI and an order of conditions, which gets incorporated in the enforcement order. And Darcy felt that that was not consistent with practice that she was familiar with, and it's recommended by the Mass Conservation Handbook. Well, I did some research, and she's right. Most of the recommendations are that if you've got something like this, you don't want to get involved in an order of conditions. You want to stay with the enforcement order, because an order of conditions provides options to a property owner, not that we would, but to perhaps not do things in accordance with the plan. So we're envisioning this all to be done under an enforcement order. We would bring back a detailed plan if you're interested in this. And if you wanted, you could hold a public hearing on it. I don't think you have to, but you could. And we could give notice to abutters, whatever you thought was the proper process. But at the end of the day, it would all end up being packaged into an enforcement order. So there wouldn't be any discretion on the part of the property owner whether to do the additional replication or not do it, or you guys decided to put in there, it's a 10-year monitoring situation or longer, then that would all go in there and there'd be conditions, but they would all be wrapped into the enforcement order with the plan. And I think that would give the commission the maximum protection that it needs, frankly, to make sure that this all gets done. But obviously we need direction from you and the other commissioner members first as to whether this makes sense and you would like us to pursue it farther and actually bring in a detailed plan that you could actually review, condition, and approve.
Thank you, Mike. I see a couple of hands here. John?
You're muted, John.
John, unmute yourself.
John, you're
I'm
muted.
sorry about that. It's getting late. Just a minor question. In that, I believe Pete or Bill at the last meeting asked about putting some plantings within that where the willows are now. Is that part of this proposal?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, go back to that, Sean. Show them the graphic on it.
So to orient you, John, these are the four willows. So there's the three new ones, and then this is the larger willow that went in back in 2018. The plan would be to plant out to the original wetland line. So our understory planting, all the additional vegetation that Ian just talked about, would extend out to the original wetland boundary line, which is, so this entire green area would be planted as Ian.
Okay, good. Second question, and Mike, this is where I don't have enough knowledge under the dealing with process, but let me ask you your guidance on this, Mike. If we approve this, if you came back with a detailed plan, if it contains such a thing as a 10-year monitoring, because I respect Ed and Darcy saying, a lot of these wetland replications go bad. In fact, to wit, there's a wetland replication on this property that has gone bad. That's the major concern I think that I have. So I would want something like a good 10-year monitoring or something of that nature. But as you know, when you get an NOI and then a certificate of compliance, that is filed in the registry. So it becomes a permanent document on file. Is there any way in an enforcement order or under some process where this could be a recorded filing?
So enforcement orders are not generally recorded.
Right.
And so, but if you look into that further, you will see that the caveat is without the permission of the property owner. And so if the property owner doesn't object to the enforcement order being recorded, it can get recorded at the registry of deeds. And I think this property owner is prepared to allow that to occur so that it runs with the land.
So that would be part of the enforcement order, that it must be recorded in the registry of deed and then be whatever, let's say a 10-year monitoring plan on the actual replication effort. Is that correct?
Yes, all of the conditions, be it 10-year monitoring or whatever else we came up with, would all be within the order and the plans that would all be recorded.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And John, if I could just add one point on the whole, the sort of the chances of survival for this wetland. My experience usually is if you have poor design, or if you have poor construction, or if you have poor maintenance, all those things usually don't bode well for wetland replication. I think this landowner in particular doesn't suffer any of those things.
Why did the replication that's on there now not succeed?
That wasn't our
Same
replication.
owner.
No, that was work done by the town for replication for the Main Street work. That was just on land donated by the owner.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you, thanks.
And our intent would be to roll that sort of, I'd say, not thriving replication into ours, and then you'll be the steward of that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pete?
Yeah, a couple factors has me thinking that what's in front of us is looking pretty attractive. One, Wilkinson has major credit, at least with me. Two, essentially digging up what was filled, you now have disturbed wet area is again probably likely going to become phragmites of fairly low value for habitat diversity. Three, as a person with an understanding of ecology and listening to Mr. Peach speak eloquently and with knowledge, I followed him along very well, and it was quite believable. The increase in biodiversity, the increase in three-dimensional height diversity, and the massive expanse of a new habitat, again, increasing that buffer width along Main Street, is all very attractive to me as at one point in my training, fairly strong in land ecology, but again, primarily interested in wetlands because, well, I like water. So fairly convincing at this point. And this commissioner would be receptive to seeing a in-depth plan for what's been presented so far tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pete. Bill?
I am also sort of leaning in favor of this plan. However, I'm not a wetlands restoration replication expert. And I know that over the past many decades, wetlands replications, they don't work often. And I don't know enough about that. And so my question is, perhaps to Ian, or maybe you, Sean, I don't know. I mean, why do you think the hydrology of the area where you want to do a replication is such that you could expect a wetland to be there in 50 years? You know, we're talking about like 10-year monitoring. Well, I think it's more like, are we going to actually recreate a wetland, and a wetland's going to be there? I understand the concept of succession, but you'd think that this wetland would be around for more than a decade and then just totally turn into nothing. So what is it? And I'm thinking it's the hydrology that really would drive the longevity of this thing. What is it about that site?
Well, I mean, the nice thing about the site is the underlying soils are fairly pervious, so you have a very sort of predictable groundwater table. And Ian can sort of expound on this more, but my understanding is the reason a wetland is because of the inundated conditions at the ground surface. So we have a very predictable water table, which then in turn leads it to a very identifiable and predictable design that will create those hydric soil conditions that lend itself to success.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I mean, that's the starting point. The test pits encouraged us. We have a site that also is, for better or for worse, been already disturbed in different ways with the nearby replication and a culvert. So you have different things that we're going to have to study closely and leverage beyond just that 18 inches. With that off to the east of what you can see on this aerial, that low marsh, or it's being called a pond, there's actually kind of a small band of upland there. There's other things on the site that really actually it becomes an area where it's almost asking for it because it's been manipulated. You have Main Street causing this artificial barrier, not just to wildlife, but to hydrology. So I think, you could there are in a deeper way, the chemical, the biological, and the physical characteristics of a wetland. And absolutely a wetland is, changing through, what you reference, succession, eutrophication, other things. But in this case, with that lighter green to the north, where we're going to be having kind of an upland mitigation planting, and then transition that down to a wetland, and then link that to an existing but somewhat languishing try at a replication. I think we can learn from our data, learn from our experience, and really do a pretty good job. We'll even set our own metrics. What is success? And I think, coming up with that plant design, but also coming up with a timeline, right? What does this look like in 5 years? What are we imagining through what we're setting in motion this looks like in 10 years and 50 years? I think would be part of our thinking, just as you said, because that would be one of the primary goals.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. Is having worked for Frank for 30 years and having worked here on this site for over a decade now, there is nothing that's done. I'm not going to say poorly. I mean, the known expectation is perfection on this site. So we know as engineers, as designers, what the expectation is. There is no room and no acceptance for failure. It needs to be perfect. And that I have zero expectation that the landowner will accept anything other than that same standard on anything on his property, including something that's, mitigation for a transgression. So, that being said, I'm if anything is going to be successful, it will be this situation.
Unless he sells it.
I can.
If he sells
I don't see.
it, John, your idea that the enforcement order gets recorded will protect the future.
Right. Okay, I think we're getting late. So let's go a couple here and let's wrap it up. Angela.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure an enforcement order is because there was a violation, and I'm still not clear on how maintenance and monitoring don't become part of our problem. I'm not clear on how the maintenance of this and the monitoring of this, as we've now extended years in the future, don't become our problem. That's all. Can you explain that quickly?
Sure.
I think that would be for you, Mike.
All right. So the maintenance and monitoring would be conditions in the enforcement order, and they would be the sole responsibility of the applicant.
Right.
The maintenance and monitoring would find their way to the commission in the form of reports, perhaps a yearly inspection in the early years. You went out and looked at it. But this isn't something that the commission is responsible to do. This is something that the applicant is responsible to do. It's written into the enforcement order, and the
Correct.
commission, and they keep the commission advised of it. And this would happen whether there was a restoration where the fill took place, or whether you allow something like we're presenting to you. Restoration monitoring would occur in any event, whether it's restoration or whether it's replication. But it's always the burden of the applicant, not the commission.
Mike is correct. It's always on the applicants on this case in terms of the violation that go with the homeowner. The only question would be like, if we're going into the next phase, we need more information and we need more in terms of the monitoring requirement and all that stuff Ian can come up with so that we can take a look what is needed or what is added to, to that. But before I go there, I want to hear from Darcy and Ed.
I would actually, I know what I said about not having it come in as a notice of intent. I went to the enforcement manual, MACC enforcement manual, and they talk about you can accept a notice of intent. It's done for buffer zone violations. It's done when the commission believes it's something that is permittable. This is not all just buffer zone violation, as we know that it's a filling in a wetland. But I would encourage, I'm going to go back on what I said. I think this is too much for staff to have to put what has to go into the enforcement order. In a restoration, I think this should come in as a notice of intent with stamped engineering plans showing that there would be a hydraulic connection. I just think I'm not saying that I support this. I really think wetland replication should be done when we're dealing with something as getting to a piece of property that's buildable. But if the commission, I'm not a voting member on this, so if the commission decides that this is something they think is approvable, then I would recommend that it come in as a full notice of intent.
So Mike, if that's the course of action, I mean, Darcy,
We're certainly not adverse to that. And an order of conditions, if it issued, I think you can incorporate it into the enforcement order. And when you record the order of conditions, you record the enforcement order, which you don't usually do, and we would agree to do that. But I think the commission needs to have both to protect themselves in the long term. It needs to have that enforcement order along with the order of conditions. So I think we can work out the process.
Mike, is there a sequence to that? Do we negotiate an order first and then you do the NOI as a?
I think what has to happen is that you've got to bring in a detailed set of stamp plans that Darcy's talking about in order to really have the commission drill down on this. Those can be attached to either an enforcement order or an NOI. If the commission wants us to start right in on the NOI right now, we could do that as well with the representation that would, if an order of conditions issued, we would incorporate it into the enforcement order, and we would be willing to record the enforcement order at the registry along with the order of conditions.
So Mike, let me say this, John, let me say this as you guys are talking. I think the next step actually is, like you said, like Mike said, bring in the detailed plan, bring in what is the monitoring requirements. In terms of the process, I think we need time to kind of sort it out what it is, because I kind of like that recordable under the enforcement order.
Yep.
To the land and NOI. So I think we need to kind of think about the process. How does it work? But we need that detailed information.
So start with the plans, not necessarily an NOI at this point.
Right.
It could become one if the commission says, okay, let's go that route.
Right.
But you need some detailed stamp plans representing this concept so that you can drill down on it.
Right. And then the monitoring plan and the hydrology and that sort of things to support.
We would bring all of that in at the same time as those stamp plans. We bring that the monitoring plan proposal and all of the hydrology and everything else Ian has been talking about. We bring that in as a package at your next meeting to take a look at. Next meeting that we could have it ready. I think.
there's a lot of work that goes into this plan. The restoration in place is a much simpler plan. And frankly, probably a cheaper solution, but fortunately for us, we have a landowner that's willing to do the better thing, even if it costs more money and takes more time.
What kind of time are we talking about?
Well, before I go there, let me give a chance to John to say anything. John, I interrupt.
Well, excuse me, Tom, I do have a comment about that, but I'd like to, Ed is waving his hand furiously and he hasn't had a chance to speak yet. So I'd like to defer to Ed first and then comment after.
Okay, Ed.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have an outstanding enforcement order at this point. We need to figure out what we're going to do with that. And so if you're telling me that you want to go forward with a strictly as a notice of intent, ordering a notice of intent for both the partial restoration of what was the impacted area and a notice of intent that will also cover the replacement replacement wetland over in the paddock. I just need some sort of guidance and direction so we can finalize and you can ratify that enforcement order. That can be, if you choose to record that, that's fine. We can do that, but we have to have something that's going to order what needs to be done before you start charging off to do plans and replication and that sort of thing.
Oh, that's what I was going to address, Ed, because I think we cannot close out the enforcement order tonight. That would be a mistake. The enforcement order must be continued until whatever the date is.
I agree.
So that it's an open and enforcement order and the commission still retains the opportunity. If we don't like that plan that they come in with within the next whatever, we go back to them and say, we don't like it. It's not good enough. Not whatever. Go back to full restoration of the injured area. Period. So that enforcement order remains open. If on the other hand they come back with a plan that we find is acceptable, we could say, okay, now file as an NOI, and an enforcement order can be concluded by saying such things as must receive an approved NOI with these conditions in it or with this plan in it. And that would be written in the enforcement order, not just they must submit an NOI.
Correct.
It's got to be much more detailed than that. And part of the enforcement order or part of the NOI conditions could be a recording of the enforcement order as well. Correct. So that way I think we're doubly protected.
I agree. Okay. I think we should leave this enforcement order open as we're waiting for the additional information before we can decide what the term would be.
Okay, I would also urge then, and I have every confidence and faith in Wilkinson. I do trust them implicitly with this type of work. However, I do want to make sure that they are fully aware of the guidelines that Mass DEP has recently put out in terms of wetland replacement. And the guidelines that they're giving for that, and then obviously it all comes under the BVW performance standards that you see in the Act under 10.55. I think it's 10.55 4B, but don't quote me on that. And so they do need to pay attention to that, and I think those are some pretty hard standards and points that they have to that they actually are going to have to take care of as part of that plan that they're going to be bringing forward. And then just as a final note, I just to understand that the whole idea of this replication of not working is not. It's not my, it's again studies, two studies in particular from the University of Massachusetts that have looked into replication and replacement. And the reality of that, those studies have affirmed that the most common reasons why the proposed mitigation or replacement have failed is they failed to meet the performance standards where the replacement wetland was never built.
that the replacement area lacked wetland hydrology. It does seem as though you probably have that here, and the replacement wetlands were smaller than was required by the issuing authority. And so those are some of the things those are the major reasons why those studies have shown that replication is not typically successful. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. And again, that they're paying attention to those guidelines for replacement, because those are going to be vital to your making your decision whether you go forward with a notice of intent or not. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Ed, do you mind to share that guideline or the performance standards for that, so that we can take a look ourselves as well?
Yeah, I'll send out and put that up with the meeting materials as well. It's the Massachusetts Inland Wetland Replacement Guidelines, second edition, September 22, done by Scott Jackson, Lisa Rhodes, and Thomas McGuire, all from the University of Massachusetts. And it is under BVW and the ability to fill up to 5,000 square feet of BVW. That's under 310 CMR 10.55, section 4B. Well, actually, section 4. So, but I'll give you all of that.
Thank you, Ed. John, anything else from you?
For me?
Yeah.
No, I think that there's a good understanding. We're continuing the enforcement order. At the next hearing, we could say, we don't like the plan, we don't believe the plan, it doesn't meet the guidelines for the replication, the studies aren't done, and therefore we're just gonna order the restoration. We are clearly, Mike, retaining that right to do that at the next enforcement hearing.
Yep. Right.
Okay, we're clear. I think I'm clear on that, Tom.
Okay. So Mike
and Tom, the applicant's clear on that as well, as stated by Mr. Abadili.
Okay. So
what's the date?
So Mike and Sean, how much time do you need it for getting the plan ready?
At least a month, not 2.
So,
out of respect for this, I don't want to understate that we're taking it very seriously in terms of what we want to come with you with, down to the plants and down to the timeline and the protocols, everything.
So with the Christmas holiday and stuff like that, I'm thinking like January the 14th or the 21st. Would that be doable?
I think the end of January is going to be difficult, but we can certainly set that as a target.
About February.
I would prefer February, Bill.
Yeah. I don't have the date here yet on my calendar.
I thought that we had that from Kim.
I think we have 4, 18, and 11 in February.
4, 18, and 11?
Yeah, the 11th is the 3 o'clock.
4, 18, 11. 4 is 3 o'clock.
The 11th was the 3 o'clock meeting.
Correct.
How about February 11 then?
Let's do that.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you guys very much for being open to our thoughts.
Could I have a motion to continue this to February the 11th?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Chairman, I think your motion needs to include and keep the enforcement order open.
Yes. Yeah. The motion will keep the enforcement order open until we hear to get more information on February the 11th.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
And Tangney, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your holiday, everybody.
A good holiday.
Yeah. Happy holiday, Thanksgiving. We have 3 sets of minutes, October the 15th, November the 5th, and November the 12th.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as listed.
Second,
Roll call.
Abadili? Foster?
aye.
Hearn?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Sampu?
He went to sleep.
And Tagney? Aye. We got a quorum. We got enough.
Hey!
Way to go.
Got you, Pete.
Our next hearing is at 3 o'clock on December the 3rd. And happy Thanksgiving for all of you and your family. Could I
Same to you.
could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Tagney, aye. Sampu?
Sleeping.
Aye. Lee?
Aye.
Hearn?
Aye.
Foster?
Aye.
And Abadili?
Aye.
It's unanimous. It's 9:48.
Thank you.
Long day.
It's a long one.
The turkey's ready.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.